Will you please all rise and join me in the pledge? Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Oh my gosh. I think I'm in a business class seat.
Is that an upgrade?
Yes. I feel like I've perched.
Someone very tall said, oh,
All right, thank you all for coming to this Board of Trustees meeting on April 23rd. Nobody signed up, I believe, for public comment, but is there anybody who would like to make some public comment? No public comment? Okay.
We have a public comment.
Oh, yes. But you have to come up here if you don't mind.
Don't mess with the computer. You don't have to touch. You don't have to touch that. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not part of the summer colony. I don't vote here. And the reason I wanted to make it public...
state your name, sir.
Oh, yes. Morgan H. Grace, Jr.
Please address the board.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate having the opportunity to address the board. And I wanted to explain how important it is, I believe, to keep the Lake Agawam clean. And I'd like to draw your attention to the way this was dealt with in Hackensack, New Jersey, where there's a tremendous amount of pollution that had to be cleaned up in a very cost-effective way. And they essentially decided to use ozone, to clarify the water. Now, the reason why ozone, I understand, is good is it consists of oxygen only. There's no residue to it. And oxygen is a very necessary element for any animal species. In fact, every cell in any animal requires, as part of its metabolism, oxygen. And if you deprive any animal cell of oxygen, keeping everything else the same, that cell has been demonstrated in repeated experiments to become carcinogenic, to become cancerous. So in addition to providing no residue, it's very healthy to the marine animal life if you can do that. You might want to see healthy minnows in that lake. And it would draw the attention of tourists if you're interested in increasing the flow of tourists into the area. And also, it would make the food supply, to the extent, let's say there are geese there that consume water, it would make them safer and would help protect the food chain. So I would urge you to actually look at the Hackensack water supply case study, as it were, and see if you could apply some of those principles to it.
Mr. Grease, I thank you. And your timing is impeccable because we have two board presentations tonight. Both of them are items that reflect on Lake Agawam.
Well, I'd be very interested to hear.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, sir. Anybody else with a comment? Okay. Board presentations, as I indicated, the first presentation we have is on IA systems and benefits, and is Justin from the Suffolk County Department of Health is here. And
Great. Thank you for having me. Glad to be here. Glad to see a good turnout. Justin Jobin, Environmental Projects Coordinator with Suffolk County Department of Health. My presentation tonight is going to be fairly quick, maybe 10-15 minutes, and then leave some room for any questions that people may have. Want to first plug the county executive, Steve Ballone, who's really under his leadership, this Reclaim Our Water initiative has really kicked off starting in 2014, where the county basically looked at what other states were doing to combat nitrogen pollution. So why is nitrogen pollution a concern? We have over 1.5 million people in Suffolk County, mostly unsewered. 74% of the population is on septic systems, sole source aquifer. Everything we flush essentially goes into the ground, into our groundwater, and that's what we rely on for our drinking water. There are wetlands. Obviously, our economy is really based on the environment. We have a lot of bathing beaches, 3 major estuary systems, and we're all seeing the problems with nitrogen pollution, with harmful algal blooms, fish kills, shellfish decimation, you name it, and Dr. Goldbush here, he can speak to that better than I can. So, but one thing that we have seen, and one of the leaders of the harmful algal blooms that is leading to the fish kills and beach closures, is really septics and cesspools, which contribute approximately 70% of the nitrogen to the waters. And what we've seen is a lot of people automatically think nitrogen, think fertilizer, and what we're really seeing is fertilizer is around 7 to 10%, depending on the subwatershed plant or subwatershed. So really, septics and cesspools, we can make a big dent if we just upgrade them with nitrogen-reducing technologies. So again, this is a staggering slide that I always show. Basically shows that 74% of Suffolk County is unsewered, meaning that there's 360,000 septic systems in Suffolk County, and that is staggering. It's the largest concentration of septic systems in the United States, and this is such a densely populated area. It's a claim to fame that we might not necessarily want, but we have. So 209,000 systems are in priority areas, meaning that within the 25-year travel time to surface water. And about 250,000 of these systems predate the requirement for a septic tank, meaning that they went in the ground before 1973, and they're pretty much just cesspools. So cesspool is nothing more than a hole in the ground that receives wastewater. It could be a precast system, or it could be a block cesspool. Block cesspools are not only bad for the environment, but they are also public safety hazard because they're prone to collapsing. So that's a concern. Even conventional septic systems, which have been required since 1973, consist of a septic tank to leaching pool, but they don't really treat for nitrogen. Nitrogen goes in through the system and leaches out as nitrate, which is what's causing the harmful algal blooms, because if you think of fertilizer, you think of nitrogen, and essentially the nitrogen in our waste is doing nothing but fertilizing the algae and causing the harmful algal blooms. So we have these new, what we call innovative and alternative on-site wastewater treatment systems, or IA systems, that are designed to remove 50 to 70%. We're actually seeing that our standard of 19 milligrams per liter represents a 70% reduction. Typically, cesspools would leach about 60 to 80 milligrams per liter into the ground, so we're getting quite a bit of a reduction in these systems. I don't really like the term innovative and alternative because these systems have been around for a while. Innovative implies that they're relatively new. I come from Rhode Island. I spent 15 years in Rhode Island working with these technologies. They've been around. There's over 20,000 nitrogen removal systems in the Northeast, so they're a tried and true method. So I feel the term innovative is a little misleading when really, and they shouldn't be alternative, they should be the norm in my opinion. So I don't like the term innovative alternative, but it is what it is, and we deal with it. So what are these systems? These innovative alternative systems are essentially a septic tank to some sort of treatment component that reduces nitrogen. It utilizes a biological process to reduce nitrogen, mimics the nitrogen cycle, which is obviously very common in the environment, but we can mimic it in a septic tank so that nitrogen, organic nitrogen, is then converted to nitrogen gas and vented into the atmosphere and not sent as nitrogen into our waters and surface waters. So that's how these systems work. They've been allowed in Suffolk County since 2016. They're not required by the health department, but as you know, villages and towns throughout the East End have been requiring these systems. So the county has really taken a five-pronged approach to getting these technologies up and running since 2014. First, we started with a pilot program where we went out to the industry and said, hey, listen, there's 360,000 septic systems in Suffolk County. We went to manufacturers and said, given the huge marketplace in Suffolk County, are you willing to donate your systems so we can try them out, see how they actually work in real-world conditions in Suffolk County? So we did that. We tested 14 technologies, and surprisingly, right now, only 6 technologies are actually approved for use out of the 14 that we tested. There's 3 more that are about to be approved, but really, out of the 14, only 10 really have the potential to be approved. So that turned out to be a wise decision to approve these, or to test these systems out before we approved them. We prepared the industry. The very first thing we did in 2015 was change the licensing law, so the contractors were trained and able to put the systems in the ground. Also here tonight is John Parry, who can answer any questions about installing the systems and can talk to his experience installing the systems. But we do have contractors trained up to speed on how to maintain and install these systems. We then changed the sanitary code to allow for these systems as of right. That was required by the state health department. And then we have working groups to look at future policy decisions. What are we going to do in the future? Are we going to require these systems? Well, if we do require them, is it going to be for new construction? Is it going to be on failure? Is it going to be property transfer? So we have a working group that's comprised of legislators, nonprofit organizations, towns, and the industry, the septic installers and the Builders Institute, and everybody's working together on these policy decisions. And also what's driving the policy decisions is a study that we have on sub-watersheds plan that's looking at nitrogen load reduction goals per water body, and it aggregated 189 water bodies in Suffolk County to look at what we need to do and really how much nitrogen pollution we can remove just by upgrading the wastewater systems. And in most cases, it's a staggering number. It's a big difference we can make just by focusing on changing out septic systems and cesspools with these new IA's technologies. And finally, the county executive has been adamant that the only way to make a measurable impact is to have a funding mechanism that offsets the cost to the average homeowner, because we can't just require these systems and not have something in place, especially in places in western Suffolk where there is no CPF that allows rebates towards these systems. So we have a pilot program that's a grant loan program that allows rebates to basically install these systems, and we have, I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. I do want to talk about the systems. I'm not going to spend a lot of detail other than these are the 6 technologies that we have approved in Suffolk County. The HydroAction, FujiClean, and Norweco Singular are the smallest systems. They essentially, they're a septic tank and treatment unit all in one package, and they're fairly small, about 4 or 5 feet wide and no more than 10 feet long, depending on the system. So those are the most common systems because they're the smallest and they're modular systems. The ones on the bottom are multi-tank systems, maybe better for larger flows, and they're not as popular in Suffolk County. So how do the systems work? I mentioned we have a standard of 19 milligrams per liter. 19 milligrams is the most stringent in use. It's used in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and we mimicked it here in Suffolk County. All of the systems perform below 19 milligrams per liter. The best performing systems during our testing was the Septitech system and the HydroAction system. However, we also looked at the system performance long-term, and we're seeing Septitech, HydroAction, and FujiClean are the best performing systems. So I don't know if I have a slide on that, but I'll talk about the septic improvement program. We have a grant and loan program. We're very thankful to the state of New York under the governor's budget. Through the state septic system replacement program, the county was awarded over $10 million for rebates and grants. So we have a county grant of up to $20,000. It's a base grant of $10,000 and incentive, $5,000 incentive for what we call a pressurized shallow drain field, which I'll talk about in the next slide. And then we also have a low to moderate income incentive for $5,000 for homeowners that essentially for a family of 4, if they make less than, I believe, $93,000, they would qualify for the low to moderate income incentive. Under the program, homeowners are responsible for engineering services, and the installation is paid, the grant is paid directly to the installer on the homeowner's behalf, so the homeowner doesn't have to worry about a rebate. There's also a state grant of up to $10,000, so if you're keeping track, county grant of up to $20,000, state grant of up to $10,000. Not to mention here in Southampton, there's a town rebate of up to $20,000. So now you start adding these numbers up and saying 20, 10, 20, $50,000. How much do these systems cost? Well, the average cost that we've seen has been $22,000. What we have seen on the East End, the average cost is higher. It's $24,000 to $26,000. And one thing I always stress in these public meetings is that the installers are, for the most part, they're good guys, but I want to make sure they're not, because there's that much money available. I want to make sure that there's no price gouging on the East End, because there's a lot more money available for these systems on the East End. And I just want everyone to be aware of that we're looking at everything in the grant and loan program. It's coming across my desk. In fact, one came from John today that I rejected, and I'll send back to him. But I go through and I scrutinize every price quote that comes in and make sure that it matches the fixed rate pricing that we have from the contractors. And I'll sure.
How do you? Because before I forget. You just mentioned, what did you reject?
So I wanted more clarification as to why the cost was what it is. We have fixed rate pricing where we went through a solicitation of quotes and we came up with these hypothetical scenarios and asked the contractors to essentially bid these hypothetical scenarios so that we have something to compare it to. Every home is different. So we can't really predict what it's going to cost, but there's itemized costs for everything. So if it's moving a tree, if it's taking down a fence, whatever it is to get to the site to put a system in the ground, there's a cost for that, and it needs to be spelled out. It can't just be a flat fee for $30,000 system without telling me what the $30,000 is being spent on. So that's a lot of what I do is I look at what the line items are and if they match the document that he had given through the solicitation of quotes.
And also, how many people are actually out here in the East End qualifying for the grants? And so, I mean, how much of the people out here are getting it subsidized?
Yep. So there's a lot of people involved. I don't have. I'll get to some numbers roughly, as far as numbers of grants, but there's Southampton is more than any other town in Suffolk County. There are no income requirements, and there are no. We lifted the restrictions on seasonal properties, so we're seeing a lot of people from the East End get into the program.
So if they're qualifying for it.
Yep.
I hire him. He gives a bid. You approve it. I get grants. Am I receiving them or?
Right. So what happens? It's very simple. So what you would do is you'd hire an engineer. Engineer would do the plan. We would send the plan to you as a homeowner with a list of installers that we've essentially vetted the prices on, and say these are the installers that are participating in the program. Contact them. Get a price quote. You as a homeowner would get a price quote from however many contractors you need to feel comfortable on the system. We'd review the price quote. If everybody's okay with it, you'd go ahead, hire him to do the installation. You'd do the installation. The installation has to be certified by my department to make sure that it was installed in accordance with the regulations. And once that happens, we would start the payment process. The payment process takes about a 4-week process, and you as a homeowner would assign your grant to the contractor. So you don't have to write a check or do any of that. It would be paid out. Now, if it's the $20,000, say the system costs $22,000 and you qualify for $20,000 in grant money, you'd pay $2,000 out of pocket, and then you could submit that to the town of Southampton for a rebate for that money.
So that's what I wanted to get to. So am I paying, you mentioned two things about how no out of pocket, I'm not cutting a check to the contractor, but then you mentioned about a rebate from the town.
Right.
So, again, I'm an individual homeowner putting it in, and you said 20,000 approved. What is the approval process? Why would I not be approved for the entire, or how would someone not be approved for the entire?
So most people are getting $20,000. The additional $10,000, because again, between the county and state, you're qualifying for up to $30,000. The additional $10,000 would be for a pressurized shallow drain field, or if you're low to moderate income, you would get those incentives. But most people would get $10,000 from the county and up to $10,000 from the state. Now the state, because it's bonded money, they have very specific rules as to what they cover and what they don't cover, and there's this exercise I have to go through that basically says sales tax doesn't get paid for, pumping and decommissioning doesn't get paid for, and we require, actually nationally, the these systems are required to be sold with a 3-year warranty and 3 years operation and maintenance. And the state says, no, we don't count the operation and maintenance towards the cost of the system. So then I have to do an equation, take all the ineligible state expenses, subtract that out from the amount, and then divide that number in half, and it's either $10,000 or less than $10,000, and that's how we determine what the state grant is.
So part of the 10K goes to him directly, and the other 10K comes as a rebate from the town?
Nope, you would get the state and the county grants would be paid to the installer directly.
The homeowner doesn't have to cut a check or anything?
Nope, you would only have to pay for whatever is above the grant
Whatever's
amount.
left over.
And then you can get that delta rebate reimbursed by the town.
Now, Jeff, was that part of because of the issue of the 1099s being issued? Is that why it goes directly to the contractor?
So we modeled the program, and despite what some people are saying, we put a lot of thought into how we put this process together, and one of the reasons was the taxability issue. And we looked at the state of Maryland and other states that do grant programs, and they do the assignment of payment. And the state of Maryland basically felt, and their tax council told them, that if you pay, you send 1099s to where the money's going. You follow the money. And they assign the payment to the contractor. The homeowners don't get 1099s, contractors do. Unfortunately, even though we had independent counsel opinion that 1099 should be issued to the contractors and not the homeowners, we do have a separate elected official who runs the Department of Audit and Control, and he felt that that was not enough justification to justify potential implications from the IRS by not issuing 1099s to the homeowner. So he decided to issue 1099s to the homeowner and request a ruling from the IRS. We're hoping to get a ruling from the IRS within 3 months. In the meantime, the intent, unfortunately, is to send 1099s to the homeowner until this is resolved. And I'm optimistic, based on other programs, that it would be determined. I'm no tax professional, though, so I don't even pretend to be an accountant. But hopefully they rule that the 1099s, the tax form, should go to the contractors, and then we can stop sending them to the homeowner. So that's that issue.
There's just one last thing, the engineering costs, the average annual upkeep. So we covered how it gets installed for the average homeowner.
Yep.
The engineering, as you referred to, every year after that, what does that cost?
All right, so
I don't know, different for a normal house? Well,
Yep.
it's all relative.
I'll go through that. Our base numbers are based on a 4-bedroom home. So basically, the engineering cost typically is $2,500. It might be a little more on the East End just because engineers are hard to find, and I've talked to some people, it takes them 3 months to get a hold of an engineer just because of the demand. But there are engineers. We do have a list of engineers. There are engineers throughout Suffolk County, and their prices are published on the website as well.
A year that the homeowner pays?
No, it's a one-time design fee of $2,500. The annual cost of the system there's electrical costs involved because the systems use oxygen to transform the nitrogen to nitrogen gas. The electrical costs range between $50 a year to $270 a year. And then there's operation and maintenance. Keep in mind, when it's no longer a set and forget, dig a hole, flush, the systems they do have some parts that need to be maintained. The average cost of that is $300 a year. The first 3 years are included in the sale of the system. Now, we look at these systems similar to you would a sewer district. If you were to sewer your property, you would be paying sewer connection fees, and that runs around $800. For the most expensive system here, you'd be paying maybe $600 a year between electricity and maintenance. So it's still less than the sewering cost, which is our goal going into it.
Thank you very much.
No problem. So the $5,000 incentive for pressurized shallow drain fields, very different way of thinking. Everyone really, now that you get rid of your treated or your wastewater by digging a hole into sand, putting it into a leaching pool or cesspool, and the wastewater leaches deep into the ground vertically. Most places in the U.S. don't do that. They do horizontal leaching into leach fields. And one of the things that we've seen is we can get very creative with how we dispose of wastewater once we treat it, because you're removing solids, you're removing biochemical oxygen demand, and you can really get, if I were to pour some of this treated effluent into a Poland Spring bottle, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between the two. I wouldn't drink it, but really it looks clean, and it's not going to have the solids in it that leads to what we call a biomat, or the clogging of the leach field. So when you have really clean wastewater that basically has some nitrate left over, because you're not removing all of the nitrogen when you treat it, you're removing about 50 to 70%, you can take slugs of wastewater and send it into the root zones of the plants. So we call what this pressurized shallow drain field is, you can see in the photo, there's this geotextile material. You use a pump, you send about 20-gallon, 25-gallon slugs of wastewater out into a trench that's only maybe 12 to 18 inches deep. And what happens there is the nitrogen and other wastewater is being utilized by the roots, by the grasses and plants in the area, and you get a lot more treatment. In addition, if you have high groundwater, you're using something like this. This is a geomat system on the right-hand side, that geotextile system. It's only about 1.25 inches tall. So if you need 3-foot separation to groundwater, it's a lot easier to get your groundwater separation if you're putting in something very shallow than if you were putting in a deep system. So because we've seen that these systems can remove up to an additional 50% of the nitrogen, we're giving a $5,000 incentive to homeowners that go with these types of leach fields. All right, and another benefit of the pressurized shallow drain field is on the right-hand side, you see a high groundwater site. That's traditionally in Suffolk County, this is what you did. You built a waterproof retaining wall, you mounded up a system, you put in these concrete rings. The retaining wall can cost up to $45,000, $50,000. It doesn't provide any treatment. For $26,000, you can get what you see on the left-hand side, which is nice green grass and a shallow dispersal system, pressurized shallow drain field, that costs $26,000. So not only is it cheaper, but you're getting more treatment, and it's a lot easier and a lot less dangerous to install than some of these other systems. All right, grant eligibility criteria, pretty simple. Home must have a septic system. It can't be new construction on a vacant lot, and it can't be in a sewer district. There must be a valid certificate of occupancy, or if it's a certificate of zoning compliance. And then if they're applying for the low to moderate income incentive, they have to give us their most recent tax returns. And then the properties can't be in foreclosure or have any tax liens. That's it. Those are the only eligibility requirements we have. We used to have a bunch more, but we opened it because we've received so much money from the state of New York that we're trying to get as many grants out the door as possible. So we do give preference to priority areas. I mentioned this before. If you're in the 0 to 25-year contributing area, which most of the cesspools in Suffolk County are located, you get priority for the grants. The grants are basically given on a rolling basis, and whichever applicants score highest get the grant first. So this is what I mentioned earlier with the price quotes. We reached out, and it's hard to see, but all this is available on our website, reclaimourwater.info. I'll show the website later. But we have base prices for different scenarios on the website so homeowners can look at it and see. We have contact information of the different companies. We have the electrical cost, which is actually, I said $50 earlier, according to the most recent numbers. It ranges between $73 and $230 a year in electrical costs. Operation maintenance costs looks like runs from $250 to $300 a year. And then we also put long-term replacement costs, because keep in mind, most systems, what happens now, if your cesspool fails, it backs up, you call somebody, they put in a new cesspool. The way these systems would work is these are systems that are going to last. They're going to last. The materials, plastic, fiberglass, or concrete. So that's not going to go anywhere. It's going to be some blowers or pumps that might malfunction and need to be replaced. We put those replacement costs on our website. Typically, pumps range around $400, and blower rebuilds can be really inexpensive on some systems. systems, and then up to a couple $100 on others. But we want homeowners to be aware upfront what all the costs associated with the systems are. So we have all of that information on our website. It's hard to see this, but this is our septic improvement page on the reclaimourwater.info. All of these links, there's a ton of information from how the systems work to YouTube videos from homeowners. We have frequently asked questions, our rules and regulations, a map of the priority areas, you name it. And I could stand up here and talk for hours, or you could just go to the website and read all the information on the website. So we do have an online program. Again, on our website, the right-hand corner, you can log in. Homeowners would register with their username, password, complete the application online. Or for those that aren't computer savvy, we have paper applications they can use and fill out. When they get a grant, they get a full homeowner grant acceptance packet that explains the whole process to them, and we have dedicated staff to walk people through the process. So some quick statistics. We launched the program in July of 2017. We've had over 1,600 people apply for the program, or at least register for information. We currently have 337 grant certificates that are active. We have about over 400 that are in process, or we're still waiting on the homeowners to submit some information. We have, this slide's out of date because we've had so many installs this week already. We have 87 systems in the ground. We have 106 pending installation, and we get about 20 a week coming in, plans coming in, so that we're turning around pretty quickly. You can see here on the chart, we changed the program. The bottom red line indicates our previous capacity was to issue 17 applications or grants per month. We now have the capacity. We staffed up. We changed our program. We now have the capacity to process 80 applications per month. And since we changed the program in January of 2019, you can see we're really exploding. We're getting close to that 80 per month. What I don't show on here is March, that we had close to 70 applicants, and then right now in April we're at 52, I believe, so far. So we're getting a lot of interest in the program, and we haven't done any major advertising. I've been going town hall to town hall and giving presentations to 30 to 100 people, but we haven't done any big advertising of the program. So this is with basically word of mouth. As you can see, Southampton's the most active town with 86 grant certificates issued. Brookhaven's the largest town, so obviously they have a lot of interest as well. East Hampton, there's 53, and then the west part of the county, not so much, though we are seeing increased interest in the town of Islip. I've done a lot of presentations there. So Shelter Island also has 13. Shelter Island, Southampton, East Hampton all have their own CPF rebate program. So how many systems are we looking at? Now, keep in mind, I mentioned we have 360,000 septic systems. We currently have 1,000 approved innovative alternative systems, 202 that are in the ground. We're ready to construct. We've approved over or right around 500, and there's about 308 pending approval. So this program is really starting to take off. And what do we have? These are the most popular systems that we have. We have over 312 hydro-action systems approved, 251 Norweco systems, and FujiClean has the most at 368 systems approved right now. So this is the majority of the systems going in are these three systems. And then just a few photos and I'll wrap up. All the systems do have control panels and air blowers. These are just blowers or air vents. You can see just a few photos. This is the hydro-action system in the ground. Really don't see too much. You see the two lids. This is a FujiClean system in the ground, and look at the nice landscaping. Nice green grass. That green grass is not fertilized by irrigation or fertilizer. It's fertilized by a pressurized shallow drain field, so it's using treated wastewater to get that nice green grass. Here's a FujiClean before and after installation. And here's a Septitech system, one of the newer systems. You can't see it, right? You see the lawn's pretty nice. They have a pressurized shallow drain field, and the septic system is actually tucked into that planting area, so you can't even see it. So there are ways to disguise these systems and hide the systems. I urge you all to go to our website, reclaimourwater.info. My information's here. I didn't bring any cards. I might have a few on me, but really just take down the information on the slide, and I'll be glad to answer any questions the board may have.
Just-
One thing before, and then I'll be done, before I forget.
Okay.
Because I didn't want to dominate before. I liked how you said earlier, see, now you said earlier, I liked how you started, innovative and alternative
Yep.
is almost oxymoronic.
Yes.
Because they have been around a long time, but it's innovative to Suffolk County.
Yes.
Do you see actually any innovations and alternatives coming? Like because
Yes.
that's been presented to me where now that Suffolk County has come very late to this game.
Right.
And you have authorized these certain systems. What is new around
Right,
the corner?
so
And then
that's
what
a-
does the current person do?
That's an excellent question. We've already seen innovation come to Suffolk County, and the Center for Clean Water Technology, Dr. Gobler, is working on nitrogen-reducing biofilters, which have been showing to get nitrogen below 10 milligrams per liter. We've seen the Fuji Clean system, their first entry into the U.S. There's millions of systems in the world, but their first entry into the U.S. was here in Suffolk County, and they're getting right around 10 milligrams per liter right now. So in addition to that, we're seeing companies develop additional polishing units to remove the additional nitrogen, and we've seen an additional 80 to 90% nitrate removal in some of these polishing units, and we're getting ready to actually change our standards to allow them for commercial use in Suffolk County. So that's exciting. So yes, we're seeing a ton of innovation, and that's what happens when you have a market of 360,000 and you open it up, especially, and then you have the Center for Clean Water Technology trying, they have a goal of 10-10-30, trying to get 10 milligrams per liter, $10,000, and last 30 years. I think I got that right.
So whatever systems they have, they can just make improvements to what they have. They wouldn't have to replace or potentially replace what they already put in.
Right.
Okay. And lastly, you said the 3 popular systems. I'm sorry. The smaller ones, but you said the larger ones you don't use in Suffolk County. Why is that?
No, they're used in Suffolk County. They're just not as popular because a lot of these are small sites, so they need a smaller system. A lot of these are pre-existing systems that are in backyards, side yards, hard to get to. The Fuji system, for example, weighs 450 pounds. It's easy to move around. The concrete system's much heavier, but it's good for high groundwater situations. There are some, the Septitech system's relatively new to the market, and we're seeing maybe 20 or 30 of them be approved. It's a 2-tank system, so it takes a little longer to install. It's a little more work, but they do work very well, and we are seeing maybe the larger homes. We actually have one system, Amphidrome, that we're about to approve. They're not even marketing to the septic improvement program. They're going after the very large homes and commercial properties.
Would they work in an urban or like a commercial or
So
business district area?
we're
perhaps?
looking at that. We have our subwatersheds wastewater plan, which is looking at doing some pilot areas where we would do a feasibility study for clustering one of these technologies in a village. For example, we're looking at Mattatuck Village right now and what that would take and the costs associated with doing a 30,000 gallon per day system. So we're looking at that. We're not there yet, but we are looking at that.
I'm done. Thank you.
You asked every question except for 2, so thank you for doing that. Justin, thank you so much for coming today. I'm glad we met each other a couple weeks ago, and I'm glad that John had reached out to us because we wanted to separate fact from fiction.
Yes.
We are not that unique on the East End. We have a lot of second homeowners here, and we heard a rumor that these systems don't operate that well unless they're used continuously throughout the year. Is that true?
That used to be the common thought. However, we've seen, first of all, with new innovations, we've seen systems that do certain things to combat that. What we've seen, and actually University of Rhode Island's done some studies, I'm sure Stony Brook's done studies, that show that the bacteria that do the nitrification and denitrification are far more vast than we had initially thought, and they also go dormant for a long period of time. So there was a study recently done by the University of Rhode Island that shows no real difference between seasonal and year-round properties. Barnstable County in Massachusetts has the largest data set of these systems, and they've done a statistical analysis comparing year-round to seasonal properties, and they only saw a 2 milligram per liter difference. So What we used to think turned out really not to be the case, and that the facts are actually showing that these systems do work in seasonal environments as well.
We have, as you know, as does everybody on the East End, compromised water bodies, Lake Agawam, Dr. Gobler is going to be addressing, and Old Town Pond and this and that. But the houses that surround Lake Agawam are from the kind of the colonial summer summer colony, and we have heard that it's very difficult for them to bring these systems in because they have to change the piping. This might be a question for you, John. Change the piping from the front all the way to the back. So they're switching it, putting it from the front yard into the backyard, and those.
So I guess they're trying to get it away from the lake, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that could be the case. We used to have a requirement that said the systems can't be in the backyard. They have to be in the front yard. We've done away with that requirement. So we now have more flexibility. I'll turn it over to John in a minute, but he can talk about the where to locate these systems. But typically, it can be a little more difficult if you have to relocate the system because you have to pay a plumber to come in and change the plumbing. But it's not impossible.
It's a lot. I did it. Your 20,000 became 80,000.
You have to go to the mic.
Oh, yeah, well,
I'm sorry,
that's good.
I should have raised
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, your 20,000 became 80,000.
Maybe John could address whatever.
Yes, I could. I'm not a good public speaker, but
Oh, yes, you
Oh,
are.
John, I heard you're famous.
You are.
not that much.
Just state your name.
John Perry.
Yes.
So what was the question?
So the areas that are closest to our in the sensitive water areas, I think that's priority area 1 and 2. They reside mostly around Lake Agawam, Old Town Pond, Hetty Creek, all those areas. And we're told, and I guess we have an individual here who experienced that it's very hard for them to move the septic system because they have to reroute all of their piping from the front of the house to the back of the house. But I guess there's flexibility now, and you might just know.
Exactly. A lot of these older houses have like a tiny little mechanical room in there, and then the rest is a crawl space. So a lot of what am I trying to say? A lot of houses are difficult to change the plumbing. I have noticed with the health department, they do like to try to move the septic system in the front yard. That way it doesn't block any obstacles in the backyard of a swimming pool or setbacks or anything like that. And then they're also going to want to try to keep it away from the waterway. But as far as plumbing, you're absolutely correct about that. I have brought some plumbers in with me on jobs. We just had one on First Neck Lane recently that we looked at, and I walked away from the job because the plumbing was going to cost double what the septic system was going to cost. So as far as health department requirements, I mean, Justin would probably be able to tell you what the health department would allow. Would they allow you to maybe reroute the plumbing outside of the house to divert to the front? That's up to the health department.
Let me ask, that's interesting, John. So you just said that example, the job you walked away from, okay? So now what does that homeowner do? Because now they just ran into a very extremely cost prohibitive or maybe impossible task of installing the system, but the law says they have to. What does that person do? Do they get an exception of some sort?
That would be a question for the health department. They brought me in because they had a collapsed cesspool in their yard, and they asked me what it was. I just went there and looked at it and said, it's a collapsed cesspool. I said, you should really contact the Board of Health and have them tell you exactly what they can do. So we brought a plumber down there, and he looked at it, and he said, this is a nightmare. We can't do that. It has to go in the backyard. So respectfully, I said, there's a few other options here, but it's not up to me. It's up to a design professional. You're going to need to contact the health department, and you're going to need to get an engineer involved. And the engineer is going to place it exactly where it has to go.
And then this is a question for Justin, which Rich had started to touch on, which are the cluster systems, which we're very interested in the Village Business District. But would those be applicable to residential houses as well, for instance, around the lake?
So one thing I want to get back to is the front yard, backyard. We have dedicated staff now, if it's a really difficult site, that'll go out to the site, meet with the engineer, and try and come up with a feasible solution. Previously, unfortunately, some of the systems could have cost quite a bit, but right now, what we're saying is if you're not getting any closer, if you're staying in the same location as your existing system, you can put an IA system in that location. So we're not necessarily making people reroute their plumbing. That's a relatively new requirement or a new policy change in the last year or two. To talk about cluster systems, they're a great idea. My personal experience is we tried to do a bunch of them in Rhode Island. Unless you have a lot of political willpower and a lot of good lawyers to draw up easements, and we would require probably sewer agency approval that would have to go through DPW, because we want to make sure the systems are maintained and have a mechanism if a homeowner stops paying for maintenance for one system, that the other homeowners aren't feeling the burden of that cost to operate the system. So there's typically something in place, some sort of agreement and easements in place for it. We have talked with the towns of East Hampton and Southampton about doing pilot programs. Southampton's been talking about Shinnecock Shores. I don't forget exactly where East Hampton was looking, but we are looking at that. Really, the best place for cluster systems are in unsewered downtown villages and things where there's not a lot of individual room. So, or if you're on a water body that's small lots and you need to move the leaching away from water body. So that is an option, but it's very difficult because a lot of times all the homeowners have to come to an agreement and they all have to agree to upgrade at the same time, which proves to be more difficult than it should in some cases.
Interesting. But just the one thing about our village here is we're very conducive to cluster systems because of the parking lots that are in the back of the facilities. So.
Yeah, and that's, keep an eye on our sub-watersheds plan, which will be released this summer, and it's going to have the Mattatuck pilot area, which actually is focusing on putting it into a parking lot and reducing setbacks and seeing if we can get a 30,000 gallon per day system in there. So that would be very applicable to here and seeing what could be done.
Yeah. Because what is it, 2 doors down?
Yeah.
2 doors down from this building right here, they're putting in an IA system that's going into the back parking lot.
We should ask what system that is, but I guess you would approve it anyway, right?
Yeah, it would be approved. The engineer would design it. Again, all of the systems, it's not that one system is better than the other. Nitrogen-wise, it might be. But as far as each site has its own site constraints, and for example, the hydro action system's deeper, Fuji system shallow and lighter. Norweco is a heavy concrete system, so all have their pros and cons. So it's really the engineer would go to the site and say, oh, this is high groundwater. We'll use this system, or it's got a tight lot. We can barely get a system in here, we'll go with Fuji, or whatever is the case. The hydro action system is in 2 pieces. Sometimes you can take it apart if it's hard to get to the site. So really the engineer, that's what they're paid to do, is come up with the best system for that lot. We have a lot of tools in the toolbox, and we're trying to constantly get more tools in our toolbox.
Lots of good things.
Yeah.
And John, you installed our first IA down at the restrooms for,
Yep.
yeah,
Mr. Gary.
yeah.
Thank you very much.
Now, John, I have
Sorry.
one question for you. The difficulty of installation, is it, a regular leach field is pretty easy to put in, but if these units, is it a lot more difficult because you got to run the electric?
actually-
you got to.
Sorry to interrupt. It's actually much, much easier. I usually put a septic system in with about a 42,000-pound excavator, which is a conventional excavator. These systems now, the hydro action and hydro action and the Fuji Clean, I could put the entire system in if it's a shallow drain field with a mini excavator. Mini excavator has rubber tracks. I can sneak right into somebody's backyard and do it surgically. The only real damage of the property is the grass gets disturbed and the irrigation, and that's it. It's a clean job, really clean job. A conventional septic system, you have to bring a bigger excavator, and the boom sticks up about 14 feet in the air, so you whack every tree limb on the way in, and you have steel tracks, and you're making a mess of the yard. We rake everything out, obviously, when we're done, but these new systems are, I could do the whole install in about a day and a half to 2 days. And then we have the health department come out, do a final inspection, backfill, clean everything up. About 3 days, everything, soup to nuts, we're done. And then when we do the project, we usually coordinate with, the electrician comes in and hooks up the panel, runs all the electrical stuff. If we have if we need a plumber for anything, he's usually there. We coordinate him to have him there the same day. So it's not when the job is all done, it's not, for the next few days, you're going to have different trades in and out. We try to get everything done in one shot.
That's great. You know, why you two are here sort of outside the scope of what we normally do, I would ask the general public if anybody has a question. Bruce,
Well, we heard his comment already, so
Bruce, you do have to come up.
this time you
here.
got to come up, Bruce. And you're well speaking, John. Don't worry about it.
Welcome back, by the
Hi, my
way.
name is Bruce Bachman. I'm a resident here in the village. My question is, how big a household do each of these units that you're talking about being so easily installed and easily and efficiently installed? What's the range of household size? Because that's really the test.
Yeah, it's usually a 3 to 4 bedroom size house. Do I trust them or trust
Us.
you? Oh, okay.
All right, Bruce, so you're already out.
Usually, the system that I'm talking about being in and out is about a 3 to 4 bedroom house. I think the smallest system that we can install with the county is a 3-bedroom. So then once you get into bigger houses, like I did a house in Bridgehampton 2 weeks ago, 13 bedrooms. I was in and out of there in 2 days. It was a wide open property. I had to do it with a larger excavator. But if it was a well manicured place and I had to put plywood down and I had to do a really clean job, probably about a 3 to 4 day installation.
That's still pretty quick.
Pretty quick. I do this. It's all I do is septics. I
Yeah.
service them and I install them every single day.
Yeah.
For the past 20 years. I'm getting pretty good at it now. All right.
Thank you. Any other questions from the public?
In the presentation, you
Your name.
mentioned, Gary Gillespie, Superintendent of Public Works. In the presentation, you mentioned that the actual lawn was irrigated by the system. Is that something that is done?
Right, it's not air, it's
It's
pressurized.
fed by or?
Come on up. Thank you.
I apologize. The pressurized shallow drain field is not so much an irrigation. We don't do spray irrigation with wastewater in Suffolk County. Most of the Northeast doesn't do it. They do it in Texas and places that are more drought prone. But what it is it's about 12 inches below grade. It's a 1-inch pressurized pipe that has orifices every 18 inches in the pipe, and it sprays the water 25 gallons at a time into some sort of half pipe or a fabric material that takes the water and wicks it into the root zones of the plants.
And you could actually do that over the whole backyard, so?
Yeah, I mean, they're relatively small footprint systems, so the concern I have is that you'll get nice green grass in one area and then you might have to fertilize around it to have it match. But you can do really creative things like the one I showed, and that was in Jamesport, and they basically put it between planting beds. So they had that zone of the irrigation system was turned off because they didn't need it for that zone, but they used it for other zones.
Okay. One more?
Sure.
For municipalities, is there another round of funding coming that we could apply to
That's a
this?
good question. I'm not sure on it. Sarah Lansdale, our Director of Planning, would know more on that. But I know that we are talking about doing some parks upgrades and things like that, so there might be potential there. I just don't know any specifics on that.
Any other questions? I'll take the both of you. Yeah.
Really good.
Thank you for giving us the time to come up.
Yep. Thank you.
Could I get a copy of that so I can put it in the record as well?
Absolutely. Can you
I have your
email?
information. I'll
Just send me an email and I'll shoot it to you tomorrow.
Excellent. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks for coming out, Justin. Hope your drive back isn't too far.
No, I'm in Hampton Bays.
Okay.
Good. Okay. Continuing on the board presentations, we have the Lake Agawam Buffer Plan and given by the Lake Agawam Conservation Association.
Just close it?
Yes.
I can just whip it up. Good evening. My name is Melissa Dedovich from Peconic Environmental Associates. As you may recall, we've been working on this for a couple of years. Our team, along with Ed Hollander, has been working with a group of concerned property owners around Lake Agawam in the development of a restoration plan of about 800 linear feet towards the southern side of the lake. As we've already been speaking about, unfortunately, Lake Agawam has become a symbol of much of what is alarming about water quality throughout the region. We all recall that front page picture in the Southampton Press of a green lake. We really don't want to see that again this year. Tonight, I'd like to introduce a new member of our team, Dr. Christopher Gobler, who's been working with us. As you already know, he is the region's leading expert on algae blooms and water quality. He's a professor at SUNY Stony Brook within the School of Marine and Atmospheric Sciences. He's been studying water quality issues for over 15 years. In fact, he's the only scientist that's been studying Lake Agawam for over 15 years. Dr. Gobler has been donating his time to this effort, and we are very lucky to have his expertise in the development and the improvement of this restoration plan for Lake Agawam. Dr. Gobler's generous help has significantly improved the proposed restoration plan. With that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Gobler and invite him to present the proposed restoration plan for Lake Agawam. I, along with Dan Galizio, never say your last name right. Dan, am also available to answer any questions you may have. I actually have it on a board. I'll bring it up.
Perfect.
We try.
So I'm Chris Gobler, introducing myself for Stony Brook University, and it's a pleasure to be here with you tonight. I'm going to give a brief presentation about the plan, but firstly giving context to the plan and talking about Lake Agawam in general. And I'm going to go quickly, but I'm happy to slow down or answer questions as they may come up. And that's not where I'm supposed to start, so let's try again here. Got it. Okay. And so you can see that from the title here, I'm giving a very skewed perspective because in my mind, Lake Agawam, there's some pictures that my lab group took over the last couple of years. I think the most important thing is to protect our citizens and people and animals from potential dangers within this lake. Justin was just here and talked about what's been going on in Suffolk County, which is emblematic of what's going on in the village, in the town of Southampton. Population growth and rapid increases in contamination of groundwater, in this case showing nitrogen in groundwater. And of course, we know that any groundwater on Long Island that we don't use for drinking water eventually discharges into surface waters. And that's the whole concept of a watershed. Melissa mentioned that I've been studying Lake Agawam for 15 years. This is a data set I generated in 2003, so the first data set I put together, study co-supported by the village and the town. And in that very first year, I got some important information about Lake Agawam. The table here shows the levels of TP, total phosphorus, the secundus depth, the water clarity, and the amount of chlorophyll in the lake on average. And it's just comparing it to federal standards put together by the EPA for lakes. And when you look at those standards, and you can see they all have the word trophic in it. Trophic stands for sort of the ecological status of the lake, with oligotrophic meaning it's very, very clean, eutrophic meaning that it's quite disrupted. Hypereutrophic, as you can imagine, would be that it's really disrupted, and Lake Agawam being in the hypereutrophic range, whether you look at it from phosphorus, water clarity, or chlorophyll. And that's quite obvious if you look at the lake. The two potential biggest impairments being these blue-green algae that I'll talk momentarily about, and then also poor water quality leading to fish kills. And so the picture on the right is actually from a fish kill in 2006, but as maybe some or all of you are aware, there was a fish kill this past weekend, again in Lake Agawam, following all the runoff and all the rain that we had. Anomalous amounts of rain, or not anomalous, large amounts of rain, and a similar number of fish died, and I had them actually delivered to my lab yesterday. My students were not necessarily happy to receive them, but we're bringing those now to the Marine Animal Disease Lab to try to get a sense of what was the cause of this most recent fish kill. With regards to the blue-green algae, this is a serious human health issue. So the blue-green algae we have in Lake Agawam are two different types, microcystis and anabena, and they make the compounds you see there on the left and right, microcystin and anatoxin. These are gastrointestinal and neurotoxins, respectively. Their first names, when they were first discovered in the middle of the 20th century, were fast death factor and very fast death factor. And then they came up with actual names. And that's because when administered to animals, they can cause rapid death. With regards to humans, there are very serious concerns. They are known, just microcystin itself, which is only the very fast death factor, is a known carcinogen, and therefore highly regulated by the federal and state government. I'll get to that. There's emerging research out of Florida that these compounds can be aerosolized and be made airborne. And in Florida, as probably you're aware, they have even worse problems than we have here in New York when it comes to harmful algal blooms. So they're really concerned about this. Lake Okeechobee is the biggest lake in Florida. And it looks like the toxins in that lake are getting aerosolized and people are getting exposed to them via that pathway. Beyond humans, of course, we worry about pets. This study from the CDC showed that through the 20th century into this century, there's been hundreds of cases of dog poisonings from cyanotoxins. Here on the South Fork, we had a dog die in Georgia Capon in 2012. And the years since then, there's been dogs that have gotten sick in other water bodies like Fort Pond and even in Mecox Bay when blue-green algae were present. And then just last summer, there was an event in Canada where multiple dogs died from exposure to blue-green algae. And the real big concern is the idea that when you get a wind, like what you get in Lake Agawam, the dominant winds go from south to north, concentrates the blue-green algae towards the surface, and that's when you have the biggest danger potentially to animals at the shoreline. Just 2 years ago, in 2016, December 2016, the EPA finally put out regulations for the amount of microcystin and another cyanobacterial toxin for fresh water bodies. So that's the recreational level. The drinking water standard is about an order of magnitude lower than that. The DEC tracks blue-green algae all across New York State for good reason, as you can imagine. All the good reasons, health and animal and human and animal health reasons. New York is also a state of lakes, but when we look all across all across New York, we actually see that Lake Agawam has more frequent blue-green algae blooms than anywhere else in the state. And I just want to emphasize that state monitoring, they're detecting blue-green algae in 50 out of 62 counties in the whole state. So it's not like they're just looking at a few places. And we already alluded to the fact that just last summer, it was actually in September, a record set for the levels of blue-green algae and the levels of toxin in Lake Agawam, the highest level reported in Suffolk County. And this is an aerial of what Lake Agawam looked like late last June. You can see sometimes the difference between the lake and the lawns is minimal because of the green coloration. In some of our early studies, we even looked at the transfer of the microcystin into animals. And so looking at fish, we saw that the microcystins that are at high levels in the water are actually getting into both bass and carp in the lake, both in their viscera as well as in their muscle tissue. So that's of concern. In fact, there was this discovery that led to if you didn't know, they used to harvest fish out of Lake Agawam, and then, well, they were sold. That stopped with this data. So with regards to the blue-green algae, as I said, the blooms typically occur in the summer and fall. There are two different classes of toxins found in the lake, and they're a human health threat. We know the causes of these blooms. Just in a general sense, they occur when water temperatures are high, when there's lots of nutrients, nitrogen and phosphorus, and the water body's not flushed well. And there's almost no flushing in Lake Agawam. There's no exchange, and so it just sort of sits there as a cauldron. To talk about the nitrogen and phosphorus momentarily, I just want to point out their role in promoting these events. This is a study where we took water from the lake and amended it with nitrogen or phosphorus or both compounds. And in this case, amending it with nitrogen led to significantly more algae and more of the microcystis. In a parallel study during the same summer, we also looked at what happened to the levels of toxins, and the nitrogen was also very important for increasing both classes of toxins, both the microcystin and the antitoxin. In studies since then, we've actually done experiments to say, well, what happens if we can reduce the nutrient levels? So this is an experimental study we did. You can see this is almost a decade ago, but essentially showing that if you can reduce the nutrients by half, you can minimize the intensity of these blue-green algae blooms, particularly during summer, by somewhere between 40 and 60%. A few years ago, I did a study looking at how nitrogen levels could be reduced around Lake Agawam, again, because that is being shown to intensify these blooms. In that study, this is a time course of the levels of microcystin in the lake in 2016. The green is the actual observations. The red and blue lines are what would happen if the nutrient levels were reduced. Not the microcystin levels, but the nutrient levels and how that would affect the microcystin. And you can see there'd be a 50 to a 75% reduction with either sewering or upgrading septic tanks, as we talked about just in the presentation before. And then similarly, this is just showing how many weeks that the lake would potentially be closed, or what percentage of the season the lake would be closed to the blue-green algae blooms. And you can see a big effect from sewering and/or septic tank upgrades. Beyond septic tanks, that study also and previous studies have looked at where all the nitrogen and phosphorus is coming from. And surface runoff ends up being, in some cases, up to a third of the total nutrients coming into the system. And I'll come back to that momentarily. Before I do, I just want to talk about the idea. So clearly, nitrogen and phosphorus are driving these events. I mentioned temperature. I just want to very briefly mention, firstly, temperatures are rising here, and that's intensifying these events as well. So this is the average temperature of the coastal ocean during July, August, and September since 1982. These are daily measurements made based on satellites, and you can see the temperatures keep going up. And if you follow what's happening in global...
centigrade or Fahrenheit?
That's in centigrade.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's really going up.
Almost 3 degrees centigrade, which is, and significantly beyond the global average. The global average is about 1 degree centigrade, so we're 3 times the average during summer. So that's also contributing here. But the fact of the matter is, that's not supposed to change. So we expect this century temperatures to continue to rise by at least 2 to 4 or more degrees centigrade. And if you, I already mentioned it, but just to put some meat on the bone of this concept, you can see my colleague from North Carolina, Hans Perl, coined the phrase blooms like it hot. And so with increasing temperatures, these blooms will get more intense. If you wanted to follow the graphs on the right, what essentially they're showing is that as it heats up, other algae die off, but the blue-green algae or cyanobacteria just keep going. They love it.
So Southampton is increasing?
The water temperatures...
Water temp than the average?
Correct.
Any reason, theory on that?
Well, as part of the study, so that date is data that I helped put together. It was actually a global study, and so the fact of the matter is, when people say the planet's warmed by 1 degree, that's the global average. But the fact of the matter is, there are parts of the planet that have cooled, and there's other parts that are warming. And also note, I just picked out summer because that's when these blooms happen. But the fact of the matter is that there are other times of the year, like during winter, we're not up that much, right? And so it really is dependent on season and precise location. But certainly the warmer it gets, the more intense these events are going to get. Beyond simply temperature, another aspect of climate change is changing rainfall patterns. And so this is data from NOAA, from the Climate Central site, but this NOAA data shows that heavy downpours, events where we get an inch of rain at a time or more, you can see has increased by 71%. And interestingly, that is happening without the total amount of rainfall changing. So what's happening is we have about the same amount of total rainfall right now, at least, but it's all coming at once. And I mentioned runoff. I'll talk more about runoff, but it's those sorts of events that saturate soils and lead to very, very heavy surface runoff. And on top, so this is what's already happened since 1958 through 2012. Recent projections are that the amount of rainfall-induced nutrient loading is supposed to increase significantly it's hard to, I had it underlined here in another version, but we're expecting in the coming years a 33% increase in nutrient loading just from the enhanced rainfall. And that's what this study showed. I won't go into the details, but they're shown, you can see these are based on climate models, and they're specific for right here in New York. So just on the summary of water quality here, toxic blue green algae are a very serious concern. It's a human health threat. It's an animal health threat. It's nitrogen and phosphorus from runoff and groundwater that are promoting these events. And these events will get more intense with climate change going forward. And so it's because of that future change that it's so important that actions are taken now to control the things that we can to mitigate against future change and to obviously to improve current conditions as well. So to the project, Melissa gave a very good introduction. This is the southeast corner of the lake, and right now it's an area that is dominated by Japanese knotweed and also Phragmites. Just to show what this area looks like, I was able to get some data from Google Earth, and they have their Street View maps. So this area has been mapped by Google. This is a map from 2013, and just to show what it looks like going down. They call it Gin Lane, and so you can see it's already there on the road. But this is approaching the area that we're talking about. This first area here, again in 2013, so you can see it was the lowest area, and I'll just to go back, there's gradient here. So during a rainfall event, you'd have a lot of runoff and rainfall going down this road. And it would be headed right toward this area that is, you can see right now, low vegetation. But this is actually the lowest area for this whole region. Oh, I also, let me just point out, Street View is done with a camera that's at 8.2 feet, precisely 8.2 feet. So when you have the straight-on view, you're looking at 8.2 feet. So obviously, if you're a person, you're 3 feet or so, 2 feet shorter than that. So this is the low area, but this is now moving along the road. You can see how dense this vegetation is normally. It's, current condition. Even at 8 feet, if you're 8 feet tall, you can't see over it here. You can start to see at the end the Bathing Corporation, the Dune Church, moving down along. You can see those areas, and again, at 8 feet, there's no visibility. That continues, just confirming that height. Here's a road sign. Road signs typically are 8 to 9 feet tall. As you can see, the vegetation being significantly higher than that. And that just continues as you go down along the area as it currently is. Here's an area that's a little bit lower, but again, you get a little further down, and again, it's certainly higher than 8 feet. And actually, the sign is at 8 feet, the camera's at 8 feet, so this is obviously closer to 10 feet all along. So it's currently an area that has invasive species, Phragmites and knotweed, and I'm sure you're aware that these invasive species are problematic for a few different reasons. One of the biggest ones being the Phragmites in particular starts to actually fill in the lake. And as it does that, it ends up reducing the volume of the lake and making it more prone, therefore, to nutrient loading and more prone to heating up. The other aspect is that these invasive species are not as effective at absorbing nutrients as would be native vegetation. So on the runoff event, I think this presentation is timely. This is not Lake Agawam, but I think anybody who was out and about either Friday or Saturday probably saw things like this. And this is the new norm for rainfall now in this century and what we're expecting more of going forward. We don't expect little drizzles to sort of get things damp, but rather these soaking events where you get very heavy runoff. And in this particular area, we would expect both runoff down the road, across lawns, and over the road towards the lake. And so we can certainly think about surface runoff. An additional thing to consider is also groundwater flow, because anything that doesn't run off the surface will be going subsurface, and then certainly vegetation that have roots that go in deep enough will have an opportunity to be taking up those nutrients before they would enter the lake. Before I get to this project, I'm just going to emphasize some of the recent projects that the village has already tackled towards addressing the runoff issue. So There's been over 20 catch basins added around the north end of the lake to intercept runoff as it goes in, so it's great strides. Rain gardens installed also to intercept runoff from other parts of the lake. We heard about the IA system that's been put in, and the recent acquisition of property near the north end of the lake that can then be turned into rain gardens as well. So there's a lot of great activity for many ends of the lake, the north end, the south end. So this project would be consistent with that, now tying in this additional area. So again, this is the proposed project, the plans which everybody has, and you can see dominated by Phragmites with some knotweed in the area as well. This is small font, but let me just say, I was brought into this project last fall, and I was asked, could you take a look at the plans that have been put together to date? And I agreed to do that. Originally, there was the agreement that I would be compensated for my work, but I've never been paid a dime for anything I've done, and I've since declared, because of some, just to be perfectly on the upfront part of things, I've declared I'm not going to be compensated for my work. So I just came in to look at this existing plan and what can be done to make it better. And essentially, as I looked at it, a few things came to mind, and the one was that these plantings were not as dense as they could be, and not as specific as dense they could be to intercept runoff and to take nutrients out of the water as it's flowing over, and also an opportunity for roots to be taking nutrients out of the groundwater and even potentially out of the lake. So what you can see of all the plantings there, and you can see the different things there, trees, shrubs, perennials. On my recommendation, the original plan was enhanced with more of all of these things in order to have denser plantings that would do a better job of intercepting runoff and preventing that runoff from entering into the lake. There's been some renderings that have put forth here as to what these plantings would look like, so I'm just going to scroll through these here. Melissa's group has put these together. Note that the vegetation here is the winter condition, when there's really, the Phragmites is almost dead and gone. And so it's lower than the images that I'd shown before, which was during peak summer. But still, when you compare peak growth on the right for the proposed project to minimal growth in the winter season, what you see in this and in forthcoming images is that they are height-wise quite similar. And again, this is with native plants that are thick and will do a very good job of removing and absorbing nutrients. And so just a couple of other points to make about the plan. This is going to be a public-private partnership, so that is, there are individuals on both sides of the lake who have put forth a pledge to support this project and to be paying for this project. And I put up there Friends of Georgia Capon because I've been working with a group on Georgia Capon since 2013, but the Friends of Georgia Capon was founded in 2015. It's been an amazing group in that the group got together and they decided we want to work to make Georgia Capon better. And this group has, on their own steam, come up with funds to tackle individual projects. You know, the town and the village wants to tackle things on Georgia Capon, but they only have so much support to do that. And so by having this independent group formed, they've been able to put their energy and, importantly, their support financially behind innovative and important projects to tackle different things that water body needs. And this is an example of that happening right here, as I believe one of the first examples. And again, it's just in Georgia Capon, it started with a single project, and it's since ballooned into there, where there are now concurrently 4, 5, 6 different projects going on. They're helping to tackle IA systems. They're dealing with runoff from the north end of the pond, from the east end of the pond. They're looking at dredging the pond. Again, all this stuff being supported by all the projects I just mentioned are being done either exclusively by private support or in partnership, because the town and the trustees inside the village are owners, so it's done together. It's been quite effective. And again, the current support for this project is from people who live on both sides of the lake. In addition, the Southampton Association, I don't know if these signatures are here tonight, are they? There's more than 70 people who have signed on in support of this project. And again, these are people on both sides of the lake, as well as just people in the village who think this is a good project. And I just want to mention this concept called the wedge. This is usually used in climate change, and it's how do you deal with carbon emissions and climate change. And the idea that you should not be thinking about a single magic bullet, and rather you should be thinking about individual efforts that can be made to slowly improve things. And so this project is not the magic bullet that's going to fix Lake Agawam, but it's a wedge in the pie that's going to help to reduce the nutrient loads and address runoff that's going to be delivering phosphorus and sediment into the lake to start to tackle the issue, along with all the drainage basins that have been put in and now maybe addressing IA systems as well.
Can I just touch on one thing there?
Yeah.
I like how you said it's not the magic bullet, because it's not. It's addressing one area of the lake. So with that, and it's a very aggressive approach, meaning, like you said, because you're putting a lot of plantings in to catch all, so that's the purpose of why you're actually part of this presentation, is the actual filtration part of it,
Yep.
not just the aesthetics part. That's what they're for.
Right.
So with that, where would you go further with, because now what you do have all the residences that do have some buffer zones, but nothing as aggressive as what we're proposing here. Would you, as an expert, propose something more aggressive? Another
No,
part
I mean,
in front, and I don't know it's hard to say to residents, but is that something they should be participating in front of their own houses too,
these
and
sorts
then
of-
in front of the lake, in front of the park too? I mean,
Yeah.
how far do we go with this?
Well, I mean, that's up to you. But I'll just,
No, I'm asking your
but
opinion.
I'll just
Where
say-
would you like to see it go?
No, I do think that every shoreline should have a buffer because, like I said, these we saw it this weekend. Because sometimes the rain is gentle and slowly trickles through the lawn, but sometimes it's violent and comes down in sheets and can run right off directly into the lake, as probably as we know happened this weekend.
Yeah.
And so. Forcing people to do things, that's always difficult. But that's the other thing I really like about this project. I think this project can be a lead on multiple fronts, right? So it leads, it shows the village is taking further action in addressing nutrient runoff. It's a first endeavor within the public-private partnerships, and it is a demonstration that, hey, look, everybody should have some kind of buffer, and thicker is better, and so yes. So to answer your question, yes.
Ideally, you would like to see.
I think having a healthy buffer all around the lake is important with these native plants that do a really good job of assimilating. Intercepting water and assimilating nutrients.
You mentioned something interesting too, which, again, which I've been noticing too. Like I thought it was an odd occurrence, meaning how they're deluges, and you're saying that's now the new norm.
It is, and it's linked to. So this is an effect of climate change. We know it's warmer. It's warmer, therefore there's more moisture in the atmosphere. And therefore, with more moisture in the atmosphere, when it rains, it's just picking up more of that moisture and delivering it right back down. So it's one of the. It's probably if people hear the word climate change, everybody immediately thinks temperature, right? But there are all these other trickle-ons and add-ons. I think about ocean acidification because that's the carbon dioxide that starts the whole thing in the ocean. But changing rainfall patterns is certainly part of it as well. And again, it's localized. So it's not, look at the Southwest, right? They're now having extreme droughts. But in our neck of the woods, the way weather patterns manifest themselves, we're getting more rainfall and more intense rainfall at a time.
Well, Chris, this recent deluge that we had of rain is, to me, a great justification for your concept of buffers along the entire shoreline. Because you and I had a conversation about the fish kill, and we weren't sure if it was oxygen depletion or possibly other sources, and which quite frankly drove me, and I had Gary and the Parks Department help me out. We went around Agawam to all the homes. You have to put a placard if you're going to fertilize or use. Well, there were, right because of being Easter, right before Easter, there were 20 homes that had placards around them. And of those 20, we did pull the labels on the products that they were using. All of them indicated, do not use next to aquatic areas, and pay attention to flushing and heavy rains. I mean, the placards, literally, I have a copy of one of the placards, and it indicates that heavy rains are a primary problem.
Isn't that where a lot of the fish kill were located too?
Yep, it says runoff. Again, the whole principle behind doing buffers. Runoff, to reduce runoff from treated areas into aquatic habitats. Avoid application areas with moderate to steep slope, compacted soil or clay. Heavy rain and do not use the application if heavy rain is forecast. Well, they were all put down, and what did we have? We had the heavy rain.
Yeah. That reminds me of an additional important aspect of this project, so that, obviously there's been a few iterations of this, and in the most recent one, there was the idea of let's see if we can do this with minimal use or no use of herbicides as well. And so this most recent plan is going to involve excavating the soil, excavating the roots of the Phragmites, and then putting down new soil such that there'd be hopefully no use needed for herbicide, which is fully consistent with the idea of let's not have things that we don't want going into the lake and causing problems.
Right. Yep.
So that's, I'm pretty much done. I just have my conclusion there, and I guess.
So I know when you and I met,
questions.
we talked about everything the village has done between the drainage, having meetings with the homeowners around the lake, having the homeowners discuss a planting plan around the lake, in front of their homes, in front of the lake, with nitrogen-reducing plants so that any fertilizers that they might be using would be taken up by those plants. Obviously, not everyone has done that. And we felt, well, if we're going to do this, they should follow through and be able to have their own planting plan. Otherwise, what's the point of this? Secondly, I said to you, okay, so we could do it doing this, 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 and this. What if we still have this? And we talked about cleaning the bottom of the lake. Mm-hmm. Could you talk about that, please?
Sure. So, there's the concept of this lake was built glacially probably 20,000 years ago. Probably also historically it's been flooded by the ocean over time as well, and maybe cleaned out via that process. Most recently, probably not fully cleaned up, but by hurricanes, like Hurricane Sandy and certainly the hurricane in 1938. But in general, since it was formed tens of thousands of years ago, it's been filling in. Right? And so the bottom in many areas is muddy. And so yet another remediation approach that can be considered is pulling the muddy sediment out of the bottom of the lake. It's not an easy process. I mentioned Georgia Capon. The Friends of Georgia Capon is actually funding a preliminary study to look into the feasibility of that. It's a tricky process. The trickiest part being when you pull out that mud, what do you do with it? Because it needs to be what's known as dewatered on site. So you have to pull the mud out, but then it has to sit somewhere for up to 6 months before it can be then used for its ultimate purpose, which would be a landfill, or sometimes there's beneficial use. It can be put somewhere else besides a landfill.
So it cannot be taken out of there, moved someplace else to sit there?
No, it can, but recognize it's a lot of mud likely. So think of like
dredging process.
Yes, exactly. So we're talking about dredging, essentially. Yeah. That's right. So it ends up being.
But it's also been concluded it would be a pretty costly and almost an impossible task to actually logistically achieve.
Yeah, right.
Do you honestly believe that if in the best case scenario everything was done, all the planting plans were put in place, totally round, including this one, we put in all the drainage, do you really feel that the lake will then remain clean?
I don't know if without the
Or-
dredging, or you mean?
Yes.
So I don't know if it'll remain clean. It'll be improved, right?
Right.
So again, and the idea of the wedge, right? The idea would be this needs to be one of additional actions, right? Now there's been other runoff that's been addressed, but I think in parallel, the sediments probably need to be considered ultimately, and septic runoff also needs to be considered at the same time. So I don't think, again, no, this is not going to solve the problem. It's going to make it less intense, which is also good, because sometimes the difference between super intense and a little bit less might be the difference between a fish kill or, dog poisoning or something else. So everything helps in that respect, but it should not be considered the final action. Yeah.
So eventually we would have to get to that probably.
It should be considered for sure, and all these things need to be, you think about the logistics. And I wouldn't use the term impossible, but everything else you said, I fully agree with. In that
Costly.
very costly and logistically
just
very
tough.
difficult.
Not impossible, just difficult. Now, also, do you, as Trustee McGann was kind of leading towards there, is there some type of goal a person like you see, and some type of benchmark you would like to see us get to, or we should try to get to? I mean, to just say, yeah, an improvement, that's pretty vague, and we all know that.
Yeah.
But what does that really mean? How do you quantify that? What does it look like? Do we get not green anymore? I mean, what?
The start, yes, right? Ideally, that's what we have, right? A lake that doesn't have blue-green algae, doesn't have fish kills. That's what we want to work towards. And one you can swim in, right? And that's ultimately where you want to get.
I mean, yeah, but I mean...
Go on, look at that. Look at the picture behind you.
So as to get what she said, if all the proper things are implemented, then how, I don't know, can you answer that? How long would it take, or could that happen?
To that point, the study that was done in 2017 included a nutrient budget. So how much nitrogen is going into the lake, also where's it coming from, and then what level do you want to get down to in order to have a clean lake. So and so part of it was addressing, a lot of that study focused on addressing the septic. And there's, that study in particular, again, it was a thought experiment, and it considered sewering as well as IA systems. But the whole thing could be done via IA systems as well, or a combination, small clustering, etc. I would, off the top of my head, I don't remember all the details of that study, but it does demonstrate, essentially get down to this level, this is the level of water quality you would achieve.
Something where I can drop a fishing line in it, perhaps, maybe not swim, but drop it. So again, best, talking decades? Century? I mean,
it depends on.
I know it's relative.
Yeah, I would need to be referring. I'd have to look at that report again. And
I'm going to put you on the spot and stand you to it, but we're here discussing this. So
I mean, I would have to go down. I'd have to pull out that report, and I'd be happy to do that. And we could have a follow-up meeting where we could look at everything that's in there and think about all the other actions beyond this one, because your point is a good one. This is a great step, but it's not gonna.
Well, we talked about that.
Yeah.
Because I just said, well, how much of an improvement will this make? And you said that basically we'd have to get everyone around the lake to do the same thing, and then and continue to put more drainage in so that all of our road runoff isn't going into the lake.
Well, that started, the
we've
drainage
done that
basins
over there. Yeah, I mean,
have been tackling that.
We've been working on that for a long time.
I mean, we've been doing it. Ironically enough, you just showed a list of people who were for this project, and I'm quite certain a few of those names were the ones that the mayor stopped in front of their yard and saw those placards. So you understand, a person to the general layman out there, the irony of why should the village embark in this project when, and that's really what I'm asking, if it's really not going to make a dent.
Yes, it's definitely, like I said,
if nobody else is going
to. That's why this is.
And I got the same person who wants it and signing off on it, actually being one of they're doing the wrong thing.
Yeah. Well, I think
flagrantly.
Part of this, I think, is also awareness, right? I mean, people aren't always making the connection, and so I think, collectively we need to help people connect the dots and recognize the connections. Because if they're in favor of this project, then
theoretically
they'd want to be in favor of other similar projects. And so,
yes.
But again, I mean, I think honestly, I think sometimes,
I would hope so.
we're in a different place now than we were just 10 years ago. You know, with regards to understanding these connections. And so, you know, you're all aware of it, but I think, you know, probably not all the public is. So I think part of it is getting people informed and on board. And I think, you know, and I think also people can recognize that these, you know, can be beautiful landscapes. They can be part of a beautiful yard. And make a real difference.
Yeah. And the other crucial thing with doing this project is you really got to lead the way on doing these buffer zones.
Yeah.
And if you don't set an example and lead, there's no reason that, you know, these other homes are going to do it either. And two, it's really such an important thing to show that the private aspect can work with the public on creating a good project, because the lake's going to take a lot of those.
I know that the town, for instance, any body of water where someone either intends to renovate a home, tear a house down and rebuild it on a body of water, they're very strict about, and you could probably talk about that, about a planting plan and how far away you have to be from the water, and how broad of a planting plan and what has to go in there. And in some cases, the view, they don't even really have the view that they thought they were going to have when they bought the property. But that's all part of keeping the water clean.
Correct.
So, you know, I'm wondering how we could, I mean, these are already built houses, but how we could ask the people who are along the lake, or tell them that they have to do it. I'd like to know if we could tell them that they have to do it. Mm-hmm. That's what I'd like to know. There's a way of doing that.
All right, Charlie, we got your back.
I mean, I've been doing this for over 25 years. I have a very good relationship with Marty Shea. I do a lot of work in East Hampton Town, East Hampton Village, Sag Harbor Village, Sagaponic, and the town of Southampton, and the village of Southampton. Everybody has their own changes, but I've had a good relationship with most of the boards, because half of my job is educating people. And I've noticed a change in just my clientele in 25 years. How somebody, I spent many zeros to buy this piece of property on the lake. I'm going to have a lawn down. And how people have now learned, and you hire somebody like an Ed Holland or another really nice landscape, they love it now. It's beautiful. Now, you were saying about different setbacks. Everybody who lives on the water, there's jurisdictions. The DEC has a jurisdiction, it's 300 feet. It can be shortened by certain things. In the town of Southampton, if you meet certain criteria, you can get what's called an administrative wetlands permit. If you can't, you go through a full board permit, which is very similar to what you do here with the Zoning Board of Appeals. You get a wetlands special permit. That's because not everybody can meet the minimum requirement. For Lake Agawam, whenever we try to get a 50-foot buffer, unfortunately, we can't always get a 50-foot buffer. So what we do with your environmental consultant is try to come up with a plan that's thick enough, it does a good job with what we have. In fact, the planting plan that we have, it doesn't meet the 50 feet, but it's taking that area we have and trying to make the most of it to prevent the runoff from going in. So you do have in your comprehensive plan that you're trying to recommend 50 feet. You do have a minimum setback before you have to go in front of the ZBA to get a wetland special permit. So you do have those established. And then you rely on your Zoning Board of Appeals and your environmental consultant for the village to decide what the best buffer is. And they really do a great job. I've been in front of that board for many years. I think they're doing their end, and I think these other things with drainage and septic, I would love to see a sewage treatment plant or system for the village. My office is right down the street. I can kayak during one of those deluges down Windmill Lane, right down to the lake. So I think these little pieces, these keys to this triangle are making a big difference. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to hear that. I think everybody is trying their best, and this is just one piece of the puzzle that we hope will help.
But one point that I was just saying is I think, yes, when you have new construction going on around the lake, these are the demands that have to be met. But if you have a house that's there forever and they're not doing anything, can you go in and say to them, this is what we want you to do?
DEC gave me years ago, and it was somebody that we both know from the DC. If we don't get you now, we'll get you later. So when eventually this house is sold, or they
Saying later is catching up. with us.
no, but it is. But actually, if you see the turnover and the homeowners and everything, everybody's coming in, and you have these people again, more educated, saying, "I want to put a rain garden. It's really pretty. I'm going to hire so and so and everything." So I think also all these newspaper articles that have been in the press. I think your picture the other couple weeks again about showing, it educates people, and I bet you a lot of those people who have those placards, they probably have the same landscape company, and they don't even know it's being done. So perhaps what might be useful is to do a mailing to everybody and say, hey, you might not be aware, maybe you should have that discussion with your landscape firm. Just
So
an
this
idea.
may be an unpopular question, but are there other villages or hamlets who've just put legislation forward to say, you have 5 years and you're going to have to update? You're going to have
No.
to take your, no?
No. None to my knowledge.
Great. Any questions for Dr. Gobler? Getting your exercise.
I'm living through it. I have a pond in my property which connects, I believe, underground with the whole series of ponds from Agawam out in both directions. Is that correct? I mean, the groundwater tends to migrate a bit.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering how much of what is happening is a result of things that aren't attributable to the adjacent properties, and how much of the nitrogen or the flows into these lakes are coming from places that we're not looking, like 2 miles north or something of that sort. Is that a big factor, and is it something we can deal with?
I know where your house is, and I know that at the corner of Halsey Neck and Meadow Lane,
Right.
that property years ago didn't have Phragmite. Now it seems like that's all that's there. And I know
That's the Nature Conservancy.
I know, but it's just, and water does flow through that into the other ponds. It's all connected.
But the water comes from the other direction, believe it or not, Nancy.
From Shinnecock.
From the
From the
north.
Okay.
The water tends to migrate down into that area, not in there, and then migrates north and east and west. So, and that's continuously drained by Shinnecock. It grows with the tides take it out. There is what we put in 3 or 4 years ago, that under the road, there's a big pipe. And culvert, and it basically goes in and out. So, we've looked at all of that and thought about all of that, but it seems as though there's a consistency amongst the ponds with regard to the level of blue-green algae each year. And it doesn't seem to be, because mine I can totally control, so I can change it. But I'm not sure that the pond, Cooper's Pond, it's a Cooper or Halsey Neck anyways, right by Cooper's Neck Beach, that seems to have a different pattern. And then you get Agawam, and I don't know what's happening on the east side. There's 3 or 4 ponds over on the east side that may be affected or not. But I'm just wondering how much of this may be coming, or do we know, coming through an underground flow into the lakes and into the ponds, which is something might be much bigger than just, 50 houses around the pond.
But also, didn't you say that when the Phragmite dies off, it goes into the pond, and then it has a pollution factor, there's a pollution factor there as well?
And it migrates in as well. But I mean, to your point, you're correct. And so in my 2017 study, I was of Lake Agawam. It also involved Old Town Pond and Wickapog Pond, which are in the village. And in that study, I drafted out watersheds. And so, yes, the watershed for Lake Agawam goes all the way to Sunrise Highway. And certainly those are all contributing to it. And so that's why addressing, septics whole village wide, not just on the pond, but, extending north, makes a difference and is important as well. And why you can't just rely just plantings on one corner or just one home, but it needs to be all these things in unison.
We met with John Irwin from the town to discuss traffic, and he told us that there's 50,000 cars that barrel across Sunrise Highway every day. So now we have an intensity of storms and driving higher quantities of water in very short duration, which is now creating a waterfall of contaminated runoff. And we've put rings in, to your point, Nancy, all the way up. But we have that to contend with, which is much more severe. And then we have continued development. I mean, we have areas, and right where you're putting this planting, we have houses coming up, so there'll be increased traffic. We've got that downward gradation to that low level. But you had mentioned something else at your State of the Bays presentation about chips. Would there be any applicability for that here?
Right, so that's wood chips, and so that's the New York State Center for Clean Water Technology that I directed this at Stony Brook University has developed a series of IA systems that are built largely on wood chips in a few different iterations. Involve sand layers, layers of sand, and then layers with wood chips. And so certainly those could be some of the types of IA systems that get put in. We also using wood chips have put in permeable reactive barriers. So these are put in not for treating wastewater, but to treat groundwater and to intercept groundwater as it comes in. And again, the whole idea of the wood chips, just to be clear, is that they promote the process of denitrification. So converting nitrate in groundwater into nitrogen that's in the atmosphere. And so removing it from the water and putting it into the atmosphere. And our atmosphere is 80% nitrogen, so it's not really affecting it. So, yes.
When was the last time you looked at Lake Agawam comprehensively? I know you did it maybe in 2009.
17.
Was it 17? Wasn't that
That was
just
2017 was the septic study.
just the septic study,
And
not
then
the...
I had done another study in 2009-ish, looking at nitrogen and phosphorus together. But yeah.
Maybe it's worthwhile to kind of revisit all the different points and tackle what used to be just a little tiny fight, which is now a big, big battle,
Yeah.
ever increasing battle, by revisiting all of the things we could do.
Fill out the winch.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on your point about revisiting. Can you go up to the mic first?
He's coming, Charlie, he's coming.
I think you have an excellent point. And
Just state your name again.
Yes, Morgan Grace Jr. And you mentioned that there was a list of perhaps 50-odd ponds that were similar in nature, and Lake Agawam was at the top.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps you could invert that list and look at those ponds that seem to have succeeded in keeping these things at a minimum, these pollutants. Would that be a possibility that you could do a study in reverse where they're not having these problems? What did they do?
Mm-hmm.
Good point. Go ahead.
Nothing bad.
I know what's wrong.
We've actually installed about 100 drainage structures now, and we've increased all our good housekeeping. We're not using, hardly any fertilizers, minimal organics, and it hasn't gone away. The same algae's there as every year, and I really think it's time that the village, the town, the county, and the private people, let's get together and do something. Let's talk about dredging and get a budget together. Maybe the town can de-water it at their facility. Let's see how much it can cost and see how much money we can raise. Because, all these little things are great, and I was so proud of what we did, but it remains the same. So maybe we take that big bite and get together and say, does it cost $500 million, or what does it cost? And let's do something about it.
Yeah, good point. I think that the biggest point is that you said all of us need to pay attention. Homeowners need to pay attention, and municipalities need to pay attention. And Gary, you're so right. We really stepped up, and 100 rings are expensive to put in, and certainly none of us that are sitting here got really good response by tearing up Job's Lane, which we did. But that was a key project in controlling that runoff. So
It actually zeroed it out in the last storm.
yep.
Yeah, actually, I had a couple of store owners tell me that, as a matter of fact, they noticed.
Yeah, that's great.
But again, if we could sit with the town trustees in the county and actually get a very serious plan going.
Gary, you got to come to the front.
So it's time to dredge, Chris. Grab a shovel.
Yeah, I'm just repeating myself, but if we could bring the town trustees and the county on board and sit together and have a very serious conversation, and, you know, we don't have to have a full-blown study again, but maybe we could get a little think tank together and say, all right, what monies can we pull together? You know, we could get a very, arbitrary budget together.
Yeah, you're right, because
Maybe we start around the outfalls and start taking a foot of sediment away from those, and, just take a big step forward.
No, you're right, because those rings that have gone over in the past 10 years, I mean, this has been a very lengthy, people forget how long we've been doing it bit by bit, Windmill, Hill Street, North Sea Road, we've been doing it for a while, and that's a good point. As much as we've done, we still got a green friggin' lake.
It's true. I mean, when we first took office, there really wasn't an emphasis on it. And quite honestly, we had a lot of clogged drains, and we used to talk about how we needed to use what we call a suction truck, I forget what the real name is, but to go in and clean out our drains. We didn't have one, the town had one, we could never get to use it, and when we asked them to use it, they said, no, we have to designate someone to come and do it with you. They would never give us the truck. So finally I said, well, we need our own then. And then we ended up buying our own, and so at least we can clean out the drains that we have, which we weren't even able to do before. And we've added that many more, which we continue to look for grant money and continue to add them, and it has helped considerably. But this is one lake. We have lots of other ones that are equal, that not this one is in the middle of our village, but the other ones are very important too, and they're suffering as well.
They are. They definitely are.
I mean, we have Wickapug Pond and we have Cooper's Pond. I mean, there's a whole bunch of them that really need some attention as well.
I would agree with you. I think Agawam seems to take the most.
Of course, yeah, and I mean, it does.
Thank you, Army Corps of Engineers. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Gogler. Is there any other questions? Yes.
Good evening, Maggie Finnerty. I wanted to ask you, what's the percent, if you adopted the plan that you proposed tonight, what is the percent reduction? Do you have the data on that? Of just the proposal.
But reduction in nitrogen or phosphorus or the blue green algae or?
Whatever, all of those that are important to the environment.
Right. Well, I mean, the runoff is up to 33% of the nitrogen and phosphorus, so this takes care of part of that.
Like a percent? Do you have any percents?
So a fraction of 33%.
Like 10% or a third or?
I'd have to. I don't have that number. I'd have to calculate.
Walk right, Chris. Be careful.
Yeah.
She's trying to commit you. That's what she does.
No, just we get an idea for the dollar spent.
Sure.
What's the reduction?
Although again, remember this is a private partner, public-private partnership. So
right.
Thankfully, it's a lot of private dollars that don't be behind this.
Always a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you could do anything you wanted to, regardless of money, what would be the one thing or two things you would do?
Yeah.
Regardless of who had to cooperate or anything. What's the most two important things that we or individuals could do?
Oh,
the village.
Yeah. I mean, I think addressing the septic effluent is important, and I think if there's a way to dredge that pond, the lake out, I think that would also be. Really move the needle. So those are the two. Because the runoff is, with this getting done, and hopefully we get some other plantings in there, the runoff's starting to come under control, and so that would leave the sediments, so it'd be dredging, and then the septic would be the other one.
But Dr. Gobler, you don't. To Mackie's point, though, those are the major, significant contributions to the reduction. But you don't want to dredge until you've controlled what goes in there, because it'll just repeat.
Correct. Although the dredging it's also an important source of nutrients for phosphorus. Not less so for nitrogen, but for phosphorus. Those sediments are actually a source of phosphorus also. So you'd be pulling out. It's a very significant nutrient source. So it would give you depth, but it also removes, and it's part of it. It also supplies some nitrogen also. So less nitrogen, but more phosphorus. So, but I agree. Ideally, everything is staged. So.
But we're getting there.
Yes. Yeah, I think so.
The other thing, we do have some private companies that make presentations or they'll drop things off, and they're trying to work with the town trustees to do some aeration and put oxygen in. We haven't talked about that at all. Is that part of this plan as well? Have you studied any of that?
So, I mean, there are bubblers in the lake right now, and they, certainly they create what I call microenvironments for the fish. So if the oxygen levels get very low, the fish can actually aggregate around that area. I don't think it necessarily does too much to change water quality, but it creates zones of refuges for some aquatic life. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Am I allowed to make comments on the whole presentation?
Yes.
The presentation before, combined with this presentation, what was distressing to me when they were talking about the houses on Lake Agawam will be extremely expensive. It might get up to $60,000 a year, which is probably what they pay their landscaper. If you look at the value, they're in the paper all the time, from the taxes, what the value of each one of those houses in the picture are. When you talk about $60,000, most of it's subsidized by the state, the county, and Southampton Town. I mean, and if you have any special situation, so we're talking about our largest playground is at the end of Lake Agawam. The children are playing by the water. When I bring my grandkids out, first thing they want to do is go play with the ducks. The ducks are right out of the water. My grandkids are touching them. And we understand they can kill a dog. I don't understand how we can't spend that. We can say to people, and if you've seen some of the summer rentals, the summer posted, the highest ones are just staggering. Rent your house for a day, and you will pay for the difference in putting those pipes in. I just don't think we can afford to say that we can't afford this stuff anymore. It's especially, I don't think you ever have a right to create a public health hazard privately with your home that can kill dogs and children and fish because you don't want to spend the money. I don't think it should be an optional thing for anybody to do. So I think the town has said, and I don't think we've passed it yet, that every new house must put in the new nitrogen. And I think 50%, I forget what, is that right, Chris? The percent on new construction, renovations, I guess, you must put in the new one.
We've actually, yeah.
And it's now in force. Is it in force now? So everybody has that.
Anybody who adds a bedroom or does a major
must put it in.
Must put it in.
But in fact, and many of you have mentioned that we have all these other ponds, and you look around them, and a lot of them have a lot of houses around. Some of them have almost no houses around them. But I was thinking that the excellent research that you said that you did before Easter, I mean, that was just stunning what you said, that these placards that right on there are telling you that they're violating the product liability of the situation. They're deliberately violating it. You just listen to the weather, you know whether it's going to rain or not. A couple of years ago on an environmental project with the village, we inserted letters in the summer, the quarterly letter you put out, which I don't know what your date is on that. But did it go out?
Yes.
It did.
Gone out.
Yes.
And the next one won't be for a while, right?
July 1st.
Something like that, we inform every single person in the village of the kinds of things you're talking about, or some other way. It's important enough that people get individual letters explaining exactly what you explained, that research showed that this is what was going on in the village. Not to just single out the people in Lake Agawam, but everyone is guilty of exactly that same thing, which goes into the roads that then goes in to Lake Agawam. Because I agree with you, it's an education process. It's a huge education process. We need the newspapers involved. We need televisions and things like this that are televised, and individual letters, because people just don't think about it. I mean, most people hire somebody, they don't know what's in that stuff. They don't know what the rules are about rain. And Chris's point about what's happening in this eastern part of the United States rain-wise, I had an experience this weekend. I'm from the Pocono Mountains, where my family's lived for about 5 generations, and we always hike through the mountains and the streams. I was absolutely shocked. They've had storm after storm after storm that have washed out bridges that have been, it was found exactly the same time as this, 1880, this community, and at the summer community. And roads washed out, bridges washed out, gouges right down the middle of the pavement from the endless rains they're having, eating at the sides of the roads. So they're having to put riprap on the sides of the roads to contain the water because it's mountainous. It is happening, it's here, and we can't afford to say people don't feel like doing it anymore. They have to do it. They have to put up these berms with plants that will be helpful. Anyway, I know that you all don't want to go out of office having the most polluted body of water in New York State. So that's really a shocking thing, and I thank you for the incredible research you've been doing. I've heard your other lectures, and I hope we'll get on this right away. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike. Any other questions, or? Thank you. Dr. Goldberg?
Thank you. Thanks again.
Thank you, yes.
Mr. Mayor, we're moving on to the next topic where we have room for comments.
Well, there's a comment section, Vinnie, at the very end.
At the end.
Unless you have
For the
a
board
comment.
presentation?
Commenting on the Lake Agawam Buckle?
Yes.
Oh, then, yeah, no,
And
then,
I'll keep it as brief as possible. It seems like we've covered everything pretty well.
Yes, thank you.
Vinnie McGann, North Sea, which is the source of a lot of that runoff. So it's really encouraging. First of all, you guys are, Mr. Mayor and the board, you're to be commended for all the steps you've taken already, because all those small pieces are going to end up into a big wedge that creates a solution. So thank you for all of these steps. I wanted to point out a couple things that may add a layer of urgency to the steps you take in the future, and that is 2 things. And I'll set a little context. We've talked about the toxicity to animals. I've said this on the record before, but I want to repeat it. 10 years ago, and usually that toxicity is usually towards smaller animals, smaller dogs. It affects them. 10 years ago, there was an incident where 200-pound, 90-pound golden retrievers went for a swim, and the next day they were dead. That was 10 years ago. Things certainly haven't improved yet since then. So that's the context that we're dealing with, and it's only gotten worse. The point I wanted to bring up is water is our driving source for our economic structure. So that's the next step. It has to be that we have safe water. And then finally, I pulled up, the surf was pretty good today, and I pulled up to the bathing corporation, and my friend was coming out of the water. And that drain pipe had been opened 3 days ago. I think it probably closed on its own, but then the big surf opened it back up. So he unwittingly was surfing in essentially toxic water. So that opens up the question of liability. And so one solution is forbid any resource use of the ocean. That doesn't work. And you could warn people that there's potential disastrous effects. But I don't think either of those things are going to work. The temporary solutions maybe, but we've got to come up with a solution to clean the water urgently. And here's another driving factor. I surfed at Cooper's because I felt as though by that point the parts per million was maybe okay with the toxins in the ocean water. But you've got a driving economic force 40 feet away from that outfall pipe. The members of the Bathing Corporation are going to have a lot to say if that drain were to open inadvertently and you've got toxic water being spewed out into their playground, our playground, and especially their playground. So I just wanted to bring that up in order to increase the sense of urgency for you guys. You've already taken many, many wonderful steps. So thank you for all of those. But it's on the top of the list. It's really on the top of the list. So
It is.
So thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, Nancy.
Any other comments? Without any further comments, we move to public hearings. And we have one public hearing that was on the proposed budget for the year end 5/31/2020. So I'll make a motion to open the public hearing.
Second? All in favor?
Aye. Don't think there's any comments from the public, but maybe you could...
I'll just give another quick brief summary of the budget highlights. The total budget this year is $31,076,213. That's a tax rate increase of just 0.97%. Our tax levy is 1% below the tax cap limit. We have no appropriated fund balance this year. The budget appropriates $975,000 for capital projects and another $675,000 for ongoing and new projects in a pay-as-you-go setting. There's a nice reduction of about $125,000 in debt service. Most of that is due to some expiring and the restructuring of our borrowings. Of the $775,000 increase, $500,000 of it was personnel contractual increases, and another $225,000 were other contractual and mandated cost increases. So the year-over-year increase on discretionary spending was zero overall. And I'm happy to say that the budget has some very conservative revenue projections. So I feel very comfortable that this is a strong, balanced, and healthy budget.
Well, thank you, Russ, for the presentation. Any comments from the trustees?
Russ and I had a couple of conversations. I just had a few. One is I see a lot of reductions that have been baked into the budget on the expense side, so good work on that. We did not have a lot of snowstorms this year. In fact, I think we only had 2 1-inch snow removal days, and I wondered if our budget is reflecting that as a baseline or what we think we could get, because the year before we had 4 storms.
We use the same percent to calculate overtime that we would have used on an average snowfall year.
I just didn't want us to go down too far and then be...
There was no reduction. Again, part of that increase I spoke about in personnel contractual cost is the relation of an increase in overtime, even if you keep the hours the same as you did budgeting.
Good. We also had a nice, healthy decrease in our debt obligation. But on the police budget in particular, I noticed that the holiday and vacations increased by 47%.
Yeah,
and that just jumped out because it was a little higher than...
Right. As we described in the last meeting, a lot of the contractual expenses that kind of year over year, we have found ways mid-year to fill those gaps. I am trying to budget more reflectively of what the actual spend has been. At our last meeting, we moved $90,000 into the police budget to cover some costs that were just contractual costs that we needed to pay that we just didn't have enough budget in. So I'm taking into account these increases that we, in the past, have kind of made some mid-year budget amendments to cover those costs.
It looks like there's a good reduction in workers' comp. I didn't know if that was a one-time on the employee benefits.
No, we, 2 years ago, Steve Funch entertained a new program that the Board of Trustees has joined. It's called the New York State Workers' Compensation Alliance, and they have an extremely great safety program. One of the things that happens is if you have a few bad years in workers' comp, and this village did, it happens sometimes cyclically. The company that you have needs to, over a course of time, try to, recoup those losses. So it's unfortunate for those companies, fortunate for us that what the Comp Alliance did see in us was a good, strong safety program and participation. They got a commitment from us to do certain things, like make sure that we have the right reflective clothing and things that we talked about just before we came in here a little bit.
T-shirts?
Yes, yeah. And training. So Comp Alliance is a partnering agency, and along with our agent, Cook Marin, we hope to be able to keep that number significantly lower.
That's almost a $400,000 reduction.
Yes.
That's a real benefit.
Yes.
I know we're going to talk about the police portion later. The only one that jumped up was the retirement piece, but I know we'll address that. Everything else. Fuel prices, I hear, are ticking up.
Yes.
And I saw a little bit of an increase in that, rightly so. I didn't know if that was sufficient.
I went up, I forget exactly the percent, I could find it, but I've kind of looked at the trend of the past 5 years, and I think that we should be pretty in line with where we need to be. Again, we have budgeted, if this budget is adopted, conservative revenue numbers. We generally have surpluses in other budget lines. So if in fact that's the case, we'll monitor it early and we'll make some adjustments, tell department heads to tighten budgets in other ways, and keep fuel costs down.
And our new equipment that we have for metering the fuel use too should
yes
should reduce unwanted waste.
Yeah.
I also think that, one of the things we ought to look at as a village is to potentially adopt a no idling policy. That may help too. I know someone in the audience may not agree with that, but I don't know how long it takes to turn a key in a car to get it started.
No idling.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't there a state?
But maybe we can, maybe, those are things we can look into, though.
Any other comments? Since we're reviewing the police, I think we should probably leave this open.
Well, again, I think that the budget is designed in a way that, takes into anticipation, wherever we go with, that decision. I don't think we'd really need to make an adjustment. We operated the entire 2018-2019 budget with an expired contract. So this budget, I think, takes into account, whether or not, wherever we end up in that contract. We might have to make a budget amendment when it, if and when it's adopted differently, but I think there's sufficient budget.
No,
We just want to hold it open for some more public
I would
comment as
like
well.
it, yeah, in case there's
Well, we do
questions.
have to adopt a budget tonight, or it does, if you do not adopt a budget tonight, it does fall back to the tentative budget, which happens to be the budget that's in front of you right now.
How long has this been open? When do we open it?
Last week, right?
No,
Yeah.
This is our second public hearing.
Yeah.
And we have a deadline of April 30th, and we have no more meetings, so
Okay.
either adopt this, or it just naturally becomes our budget.
Oh, this becomes our budget.
Yes, because you haven't made any change, you haven't made
done
any
any
changes.
changes.
So what happens is over the course of, you take public comment, the village administrator and the mayor present a budget. The board has an opportunity to amend the budget in its two meetings within the month. It then adopts a budget as amended or as presented, and if you fail to do so, the budget becomes the final adopted budget. It would, yeah.
So then we might as well just go on.
We might as well.
So, I don't know if there's anyone else, but there's no one else here.
Yeah.
Doesn't look like it now.
Need to close the public hearing.
Yes.
So entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Entertain a resolution to adopt the 2019-2020 Village of Southampton budget as presented in the tentative budget.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Should it be a roll?
Should it be a roll call for this?
Roll call.
Yep.
Bill?
Roll call.
Yes. Yeah, we should start this.
Don't mess this up. We already got a system here, Bo, damn it.
Trustee Yastrzemski?
Tricky, I didn't realize
Threw
that.
Bill off there. Bill doesn't know what the hell's going on.
Yeah. Trustee Yastrzemski?
Aye.
Trustee Allen?
Aye.
Mayor Irving?
Aye.
Trustee McGann?
Aye.
Trustee Hattrick?
And I.
There you go.
Thank you, Bob.
Bill thought he did something wrong when you called him. Jeez.
Last and least.
No, it's good to know that if something happens to me, Bo is ready.
All right, we have communications to the board.
Yes. We did receive, it was mentioned earlier, we did receive communications from the Southampton Association requesting support for a public-private partnership to restore and improve the buffer along the southeast side of Lake Agawam.
Well, I think that all of us need to review the plans and take a good look at what we're doing, but I think overall it's a pretty positive project. So I guess we move on to the suggested resolutions.
So I'll entertain a motion resolved that the reading of the minutes for the public session of April 11th, 2019 be dispensed with, and that those minutes be accepted as filed by the village administrator, and that the actions taken at that meeting be and hereby are ratified and approved.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Entertain a motion resolved that the claims for the warrants dated April 23rd, 2019, totaling $712,570.34, warrant number 15 of the general fund, and $121.85, warrant number 18, trust fund, be audited and approved.
Make the motion.
Is there a second?
Second?
Okay. Discussion. Items over $1,000. Above all chimney, $3,150. That's emergency chimney repair for the History Museum. Alliance Systems Integrations, Inc., $1,750. That's service 3 doors at the Windmill Lane Firehouse and key fob issue at the Police Department. Thomas Campbell, $1,000. That's a medical reimbursement. Cleary Consulting, $1,575. That's planning services for a particular project. Cook, Marin and Associates, $36,618.29. That's village insurance and umbrella policy. Terry Tramontano, $1,000. That's court reporting services. Finance manager, $2,687. That's for W-2, 1099, and 1095 processing. Rachel Hulse, $1,000. That's medical reimbursement. Island Tech Services, $2,024. That's firewall services for the fire department. Johnstone Supply, $1,237.93. That's HVAC services on Willow Street. Compan Inc., $1,350. That's for some additional fish design on the playground surface at the Woodenwood Way Park. Liberty Ironworks, $1,436. That's for fabrication services for the Highway Department. Lipsky Enterprises, Inc., $84,090.01. That is the second payment for the Nugent Carriage House restoration, which is a reimbursable project through a state grant. Long Island East Printing, $1,740. Those are mandatory, they're called long calendars for the fire department. Malvisi Equipment, $1,192. Those are repairs and replacement parts for the washdown truck in parks. Martin's General Contracting, LLC, $3,250. That's roof repairs at the History Museum. Mutt Mitt, $1,057.85. Those are supplies for Mutt Mitts. National Grid, $5,114.22. That's natural gas for multiple locations. Norsec & Son, Inc., $1,040. That's dumpster for refuse for the Highway Department. New York State Employees Health Insurance, that's $362,606.46. That's the employee health insurance for the month of April. Optimum, $1,117.41. That's internet and modem services for multiple departments. Port Jefferson Rental Center, $16,099. That's for the steamroller for the Highway Department that the board approved a few meetings ago. PSEG Long Island Collection Services, $6,290.75. That's electric services for multiple locations. Rapid Recovery Towing Services, $1,220. That's for towing charges. Claire Shea, $1,000. That's medical reimbursement. South Fork Asphalt, $141,699.50. That's the Meeting House Lane Drainage Project, which is also a reimbursable from the CPF funds. Suburban Auto Services, $7,104.41. That's repairs to 2 vehicles, which is being reimbursed by insurance. VHB Engineering Services and Landscaping, $2,695. That's the Railroad Plaza Drainage Design Engineering Services. That is our part of the grant that we will be responsible for that drainage project. WB Mason, $1,087.98. That's for some file cabinets and supplies for multiple departments. If there aren't any questions, all in favor?
Aye.
Entertain a resolution that the Board of Trustees approves the appointing of the following individuals as election inspectors for the village election on June 21st, 2019, effective April 23rd, 2019, and the list is right there. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Entertain a motion whereas the Board of Trustees has adopted a budget for the fiscal year beginning June 1st, 2019 that does not require a real property tax levy in excess of the amount otherwise prescribed in General Municipal Law Section 3C, and whereas the village has adopted Local Law Number 3 of 2019 authorizing a tax levy in excess of the limit established in General Municipal Law 3C. Therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby repeals Local Law Number 3 of 2019 as provided in Section 4 of such law.
Can you just tell me this in English?
Okay. Let's have a
The 2%.
motion to move.
So moved.
And a
It's
second.
removing the 2% thing.
Okay, on discussion. In early March, this board, because you're of the uncertainty that something could have come up in which you may have wanted to exceed the tax cap.
I remember this.
Right.
I got it.
Right, so now you
Yep.
rescind it because we didn't have to.
Yeah.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Entertain a motion resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves that a valid beach parking permit must be displayed in or on any motor vehicle parked or standing in or upon the parking facility at Cooper's Beach during weekends and holidays from May 25th, 2019 through June 16, 2019, and on a daily basis commencing June 24th, 2019 through and including September 2nd, 2019.
Make the motion.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Entertain a motion resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves the hiring of Emily Beers as a seasonal clerk for the tax receiver at an hourly rate of $17 an hour effective June 3rd, 2019.
Make the motion.
Second.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Entertain a motion resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves the hiring of Nicholas Johnson as a part-time laborer for the Parks Department at an hourly rate of $15 an hour effective April 26, 2019.
I make that motion.
Okay. Discussion. Nicholas Johnson is a seasonal employee that we hire, that we've hired in the past. It's coming back this year. There is some additional preparation work that the Parks Department is looking to get ready in advance of the season. Given the fact that they did not use their part-time budget, and they have enough part-time budget, and they're limited to working Mr. Johnson no more than 20 hours, it was recommended by Department Head Phillips that we bring Mr. Johnson on early, and then once the season comes, he'll be hired as a seasonal employee if the board wishes at his regular full-time seasonal hours.
Can we go back to Emily Beers, number 6?
Can we finish this?
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought we were finished.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So Emily Beers, she's seasonal clerk for tax receiver, which I understand because it gets very, very busy.
Yes.
How long do you think she will work?
6 weeks.
Okay.
And one of the reasons it's difficult to find people for that position
Yeah.
because it's limited, so it kind of takes people out of finding full summer jobs.
Yeah.
So it's a little difficult. So Danielle did do a search, and it was difficult. You know, once people found out how short a period of time it was, and she did interview 2 people, and this
Takes away from the opportunity of getting a full summer
Right.
season job.
Right.
and given the fact that this makes transportation easier and those types of things, and there will be no cross
Gotcha.
work done. Okay. Entertain a motion resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves the Southampton Village Volunteer Ambulance 2018 Length of Service Award Program list, which has been reviewed and certified by Chief Epley.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Entertain a motion resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves the Southampton Village Fire Department 2018 Length of Service Award Program list, which has been reviewed and certified by Chief Stevens.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Some discussion on the next. Entertain a motion resolved that the Board of Trustees, upon the recommendations of the Southampton Village Fire Chief and the Supervisor of the Village Garage, hereby deems the Pierce Aerial Fire Truck serial number 4P1CT02G9RA00077 as surplus.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Discussion. Yes.
Yes.
This is the motion, this is the process we have to do. We have a new ladder truck coming in, which is being built as we speak. We have 2. This is the one that it is replacing. A few different options we had to do with it is to keep it in service until the new one comes along. And this was always going to be decommissioned, ultimately. but, common practice, wait till the machinery replacing it comes in. However, and sometimes what we do, there's different options we have when we decommission a vehicle. We can donate it to another department, sell it, auction it, different things. So what's happening here is that it's been discovered that there is actually an interested buyer for this apparatus. That is a number that is too good to pass up. So the department has agreed to actually decommission this, which is what this is, and make it surplus so that it can be sold and be without that actual extra ladder truck currently, and rely on mutual aid should the event occur, if needed, and then the new one will just come in as scheduled.
When is the new one scheduled?
What's the latest one? August? Okay. So the time lapse is not bad.
We don't
And even
have
if
an
that,
aerial there, you're saying?
No, we do.
we do. We have currently 2.
Okay.
And this is the oldest one that is being replaced. And again, had this,
Is it at all?
I'm sorry?
Are we not using it at all?
Well, it's not that it's not being used. It's not about whether it's used. I can't give you an answer how often it gets used, but it has been used. If we find ourselves in the opportunity, in the situation where we do need a second, there are other neighboring departments that we can mutual aid on in a short amount of time that would cover the shortfall.
I don't like having to rely on anyone else.
We do it already. This particular apparatus, based on the numbers used, it's not, trust me, we got the chief and the department, okay, and I understand what you're saying. I'm not going to second guess what these people know that they can.
Is it a little premature to get rid of it?
We're talking a matter of months, though.
Yeah, there's two things that are...
Months don't mean
Days.
anything. I mean, tomorrow we could have a fire that we need it.
There's a couple
You're
of other
absolutely
factors.
right, Nance, but
One of the reasons why Ken Zay is also recommending is that the truck is in the shop quite a bit. It really needs a pretty solid overhaul.
So it's not really
this is the one that got jammed up in the
No,
Sarah
it's
fire.
usable.
Yes.
I mean, to answer your question, it's not much of a loss, being rather blunt.
It's not about that for me. It's not about that for me. I mean, if we have other vehicles that are replacing it, that's fine, but we're waiting until August to get one to replace it, which will be better, and now we're down a vehicle, and now we have to look to mutual aid. I think that's ridiculous.
I think
pretty
that the
standard, as a
I
matter
think
of
that the
fact.
chief... I think
I don't
the
ever
chief-
remember
the chief-
it ever coming up before.
Actually, it has. I mean,
Well, I don't ever remember
but
coming up to us
But if the
before.
chief, because this is a recommendation of the people who use it.
One of the other things, Nancy, that's different now is that we, up until recently, sold vehicles and decommissioned vehicles without it coming in front of the board.
No, I remember that they came in front of the board, we gave vehicles away, which happened to be a sore point.
Donated, yes, yeah.
It happened to be a sore point because we gave vehicles to upstate New York, to fire departments that couldn't afford it, but we gave them away. And now,
It was a sore point.
well, it was to some people, because a lot of people brought it up, why are we giving this stuff away? So,
Helping out
And
a poor district.
But I recall in the presentation and talking to Ed and everybody that the intent was always to sell this because it was going to be a little bit of a kicker for the cost of the new truck.
Correct.
Correct.
So the price is good now. That the price could not be as good in a few months. So the math was done by the administrator, recommended, and the department, the chiefs, all the chiefs sat down and the council sat down and said they decided that this is fine with them to go ahead.
We could
are they
have the chief
selling
come
it,
in...
or are they using it as surplus? What does that
They're
mean,
selling.
surplus?
They're selling it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's being sold, which was always the case, as Trustee
They were
Allen
always
said.
going to sell
So
it.
they
But-
have a buyer now?
Correct.
Oh, okay, you didn't say that.
Yes, I did ask that. No,
I
it's
don't
actually
remember you
said,
saying
yeah.
It's actually in Peru.
It was always in Peru. They mentioned that last October.
You know,
That they
and the-
had a
And the price right now that they're offering is they're afraid that would go down in the.
Okay, that changes everything for me at the moment, because when it said surplus, I thought
We had a
it's
budget.
parts.
No. It has to be declared that to be decommissioned and then sold.
Oh, okay.
It's a
But I guess-
it's a process. is
I
what
guess
we're
the
doing.
experts are saying it's on its last legs for what we need it for here, so the risk is not, there's no risk.
Correct.
Didn't they say,
I want to say 90,
yeah, 70 or 90 is the number I remember,
you know.
something like that.
And
the-
they
the
budgeted
donation-
45,000 is
Yeah.
what they said.
So they got a number that, again, it's too good to pass
makes me
up,
feel
that
better.
could go down. And plus, they need it, so the time frame, and the apparatus you're mentioning, the apparatus you're talking about, that we gave to the Roscoe Fire Department, the value of it was not, this is significant amount to get for a used piece of apparatus. This was nowhere near that. So that's, I remember that discussion, but the numbers were nowhere near like this. Because quite honestly, if there were numbers like this, we wouldn't have given it away. It really had no value of a substantial. But that's why that occurred.
Everything has value.
But we're talking real money, something you can actually do with.
Well, somebody's using it.
Yeah, Peru actually, I think, practically begs for these machines.
A lot of people do, because not everybody
Can
has the
afford it.
funding that we are very fortunate to have.
Also, their safety standards are not quite the same.
And-
That's
and
exactly
it's-
right.
We have the OSHA and the safety stuff that really precludes us in New York State and the United States using certain apparatus, where they don't have those same stringent regulations in someplace like Peru. I mean, that's just skinny on it.
Okay, thank you.
All in favor?
Aye. Okay. Discussion items. Let me get,
Oh, it's no longer Danielle?
Southampton Artists Association, Art in the Park, July 13th to 14th.
Go ahead.
Annual,
Yeah,
every
the
year,
usual.
change, same weekend.
New president for the IC on the bottom?
No, Dom, don't ask me how to say the name, but Dom has been the president.
Oh, I thought Danielle was.
Lamontanero.
Treasurer.
Oh.
How do you say that?
Lamontanero.
Lamontanero.
There you go. I just call him Dom.
Lamontanero, what's the problem?
Lom.
So I'll entertain a motion to permit the Southampton Artists Association Art in the Park for July 13th and 14th, 2019. Second.
Second.
All in favor?
And the second discussion item, Southampton School District use of the village U.S. flag. That's our big flag, which I think we've done every year with them too.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, that's nice.
Standard procedure. So moved.
So
I'd like to,
I'll make a motion for the Southampton School District to use the village U.S. flag.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
The third one, Southampton Hospital, which is sort of an interesting program.
Yeah.
It's free sunscreen program at Cooper's Beach.
You're giving away?
Yeah, there's some
They
pictures,
actually
yeah, there's some
give it away.
pictures there.
Wow.
We'll take it.
Yeah, this just came up today, and it's Stony Brook Southampton is going to be
Yeah, so they-
sponsoring it. They would put this up at, they asked to just do it at Cooper's this year. Can either go in the ground or it can be attached to a fence post or wherever we would like. They will come every week, maintain it, make sure everything works properly. We'll have refills available, and it's a copper tone 30 SPF that they use. And all ingredients are listed so that if anybody has a concern, they would see them.
Nice.
Great. Little advertising.
It's only a
but helps us
liability
all.
until something happens.
Yep.
Well, I think we should entertain an agreement that we would,
Need it in
Be
writing.
resolved of any liability.
right, so I think we'd
Indemnified.
Indemnify?
Yeah, right.
Okay,
All right, Counselor.
okay.
You proved
So
your
I
key
would
tonight.
have, so they would fill out an indemnification
I wasn't that
form.
hungry anymore.
I would think we would ask them to, we'd probably
Provide
take
us.
one of our standard kind of
Yeah.
contracts, throw it over to Wayne, and, have him review it.
Okay.
Because it is a private company. It's not.
Right.
We don't know who
I
it
see
is.
that. Well, no, actually,
Well,
this is
it's
as
through-
discussed,
it's-
my company creative, so whoever this
Yeah.
person is, it's saying.
And they're
I'm just-
working directly with
They're working with
Southampton
it, but
Town.
yeah, but it's a privately owned
Right.
company.
So the town is doing it at all of the town beaches this year.
So whatever they're doing, we do.
and then the town thought that they might want to approach us about doing it at Cooper's.
So they definitely had indemnification, something, because it's a private company. All right.
Okay.
All right, Laura, nice job.
So would you prefer that we just get everything drafted and then we'll do a resolution at the next meeting?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the fourth item is Peconic Bay Antique Auto Club, tour of the South Port, October 26th.
Again, this is a new one that has come up this year, and basically what they're asking is the use of Downs Family Park as the starting and ending point for this, and then they'd like to do a photo op at Cooper's Beach at the Overlook. They will be going around Watermill and will come through the village, but they didn't have an exact route. I did ask them to provide us with an exact route when they have it so that we could let our police department know. They're anticipating 15 to 20 cars, most likely. So not a huge turnout this first year, but hoping that it would grow.
Yeah, I remember talking to some of the people involved in this, and they've been doing it, and it's similar to what they have in Watermill and other places, and so they wanted to, it's something that they felt it's the one of the many, the myriad of things we have in the village that we don't have a car one.
Right.
So I said, well, go ahead, give it a shot. So
Again, here, I'd recommend us getting back to them and letting them know whether if Chief approves and
there's
everyone
no
else
schedule
approves,
conflict.
and no scheduling conflict, that we would be
There is not.
favorable and go to the next step, and then we can pass a resolution.
The only thing is that weekend is the Ragamuffin Parade, but it's the next day.
And they don't bump into anybody playing soccer or baseball or anything else
I
at
don't
Downs
believe
Park?
so, but I
That's it.
can check with the Downs Park with Steve Phillips has that schedule.
Somebody ought to ask Craig Rayner to forward a copy of the insurance policy over to us.
Yes, exactly.
All right.
It's part of our application process, too, so I think they were looking to see if in fact we were favorable.
Yeah.
And then
They can't take interesting choices.
and let them put an application package together with the insurance and everything, and then next meeting,
Well,
if the chief, agrees on the route and everything, we can.
Assuming the route's going to be down Flying Point, Cobb, and all that to go into
Yeah,
one. So it's really,
exactly.
so,
Around Meecox.
yeah, it's not even really, around Meecox, so it's not even going to be an impact.
It's
And it's
only,
going to be mostly town.
and it's only
honestly.
15 to 20
Yeah, so
cars.
exactly, we're only approving.
Bridgehampton, isn't it?
I'm sorry?
Steve is from Bridgehampton. isn't he?
Yes, Steve Phillips, yeah.
Greg's one of our firefighters.
okay. Now we have comments from board members. Trustee Uskremski.
Yes, I just want to make a mention of the loss that the village has had over the weekend. Ed Corrigan Sr., otherwise known as Ebby. He served over 70, I know you have probably something bigger, but it's just from the fireman perspective, he served over 70 years with the Southampton Fire Department, with the Hook and Ladder Company. A couple of his sons, there's a legacy there. His sons are a member of the Hook and Ladder Company, and grandson as a junior. And he was a member of the Antiques Committee as well. So he's been, again, his entire family has been a large part of volunteerism for the Southampton Fire Department, as well as the entire family has always been a large part of the community on many other fronts and community efforts. So, again, condolences to the immediate family and, of course, to the Southampton Fire Department family for the loss.
Yeah, it's. Thank you, Rich. It's a big loss, and for anybody who would like to know, there'll be a visitation. It will be at Brock's Funeral Home in Southampton on April 24th.
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
And firematic service at 7:30.
Yes. Yep. On the 25th, I think. Right. At the Basilica Parish at the Sacred Hearts. So big.
Yeah, there's not many members throughout the years that serve over 70 years at a company. There's only the very short list.
Yep. Actually, one write-up on him said he was 75 years.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's over.
Oh, my gosh.
It's a long time.
Long time.
Yeah, he was born right in Southampton.
Family's institution.
Yep.
believe there's a street named after them, so they've clearly been around for a while. So, no, definitely, the entire family has been a large contributor to the community since a long time.
Yep. Incredible loss.
That's all I got.
Trustee Allen.
Yes, if Julie and Charlie can help me, we just want to announce that next Wednesday is our senior appreciation event at the Southampton History Museum. It's starting at 12, and of course, we're all invited. It ends around 3 o'clock. As usual, we'll have presenters from the area who will share some helpful secrets and tips. Unfortunately, this doesn't say secrets and tips. It just says secret and tip, so I guess we're just getting one tip.
Just one tip?
I've changed it on the website. It's
Thank
lots
you
of
for
tips
doing
now.
that.
Not a tip, but tips.
But we had it last year. We had a lot of good guest speakers, and people learned a lot as we were all there, of course. But the best part is there's going to be some pretty heavy lunch snacks and hors d'oeuvres and refreshments for everyone to enjoy. And again, thanks to our senior committee, Judy Johnson and Lori Collins and everybody else supporting this at the museum. We do appreciate it if people could RSVP because we have about 35 spots and not that much space, but it's certainly going to be fun.
And last year was pretty good attendance.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
I think the U.S. Open had something to do with it.
Yeah, that's right, because they spoke, so that's right.
Right.
But he's always good at that. So they did good.
And then
That's a great
just a
venue.
couple of watch items. We're hearing that everybody's getting robocalls from the IRS, and everyone should have filed their taxes by now, but just a reminder that if you receive a call
It's a
that
scam.
you haven't paid, you're delinquent, and they're going to come and arrest you and drag you out of your house,
not
the
what they
IRS never calls you to alert you of that. They send you a letter. And then,
I think all these robocalls are unbelievable.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
so many of them. I got some from Social Security. They don't call you either. And it was like, if you don't answer us, we're
They're all
going to
threatening,
rescind
yeah.
your Social Security. I know, that's not happening. So the fact of the matter is, they're all over. I mean,
Yeah, they-
emails, phone calls, cell phone calls. It's like we're at war. It's like a war of this
it's terrible.
information.
The latest scam, use of technology, social media.
And they're
So,
getting
yeah.
better and better and better
They
at it.
are. They really are.
Yeah, so yes, that's good. I'm glad you mentioned that, because
So who you don't know, just don't.
that's not how those agencies operate.
And just
Oh, yeah.
another reminder that our newly enacted legislation on gas leaf blowers takes effect May 20th. I know we're going to be putting ads in the paper, but people should become familiar with the restrictions because it wasn't just gas leaf blowers, some restrictions on the hours, timing. So the legislation is on our website, and everyone can look at those specifics. Julie, where would they be on the website?
Well, as soon as it goes through the state process, Albany, then it becomes part of the actual code, so it's automatically in the code. But in the meantime, we had it under public hearings and with that, and I can just make a separate tab as well.
Yeah, I think we can put it on the
Yeah,
site.
I'll put it right on the site now that the road
It generally
is pretty
takes them about 10 days to
Yeah.
get back to
So I'll
me.
just put
I
it
have to
up.
send it up to the State Department to get it, yeah.
I'll just add it as a separate under what's happening, just to be informed.
Yeah, that's good. Good idea. And then the last thing is, apparently New York State has the highest percentage of deaths by fire because we don't have up-to-date batteries in our fire alarms. I just heard that the other day. That was terrible. Yeah, so this is the time where everybody should update their...
Usually when you change your clocks.
Change your clocks, which should have been
Twice a year is what they recommend, check batteries, is really rule of thumb. When you change your clocks, change your batteries. Thank you, man.
You weren't here last
With
time.
the facial
so-
expression, too, to go along with it. To elicit even more pity.
That was it.
That's it?
That was it. Well, thank you, Trustee Allen. Trustee McGann.
Well, the only one thing I want to add is on June 15th, the Southampton History Museum is having its 120th birthday party.
Yep.
Right.
And so they're inviting the public. They'll have cake on the grounds of the museum, and the public's invited. So I just wanted to mention that.
Aren't you mayor then?
When?
When was it?
And that is also on our website.
Once upon a time?
Yeah, okay.
Good.
Thank you.
And also that I wanted to say today was really terrific, I thought, with all the information regarding Lake Agawam.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Good data.
Good work. Trustee Hattrick.
Is it too late to laugh?
No, I'm waiting.
Never too late.
That's why you're always picked at the end.
I lie in bed at night and I remember these stories I was told a long time ago. But anyhow, this U.S. serviceman was stationed in Germany, and he was married. But
He was married?
But he was there by himself. Anyhow, he became quite enchanted with this German girl, all of whom are very beautiful, as I'm sure you know. And just before he was being sent back home, she informed him that she was pregnant. And he, oh, dear Lord, what to do? He said, we really can't have this get out. He said, when the baby's born, would you send me a letter and just write on the piece of paper the word kraut? And I'll know what that signifies, and I'll do everything I can to help. So 3 months later, he's home, and he gets this letter from Germany, and he opens it up and looks at it, and it says, kraut, 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 2 with wieners, 1 without.
Counselor, any comment on that one?
Not up to snuff, right?
I don't want to risk Mr. Hattrick's liability in the world
Can we strike that from the record?
of public criticism.
I'll entertain a motion to.
Strike that from the record, and Charlie, edit that? Anything else, Mayor?
I don't know. I usually cross my fingers when he starts making the jokes, and this time I uncrossed them. In any event, this Lake Agawam buffer is, it's the real importance of the project is bringing a public entity in helping us on a very important project. And, I realize most of them do live around the lake, but if you looked at the list, there's a lot that don't live around the lake.
But I think, our stumbling block on this has been the height of the plants.
Yes, it has. Yep.
And we voted that we love the idea of this, but we don't want to block the view.
Yep.
And so I don't see a change in that. And I think, we've had our planner look at it, and our planner can come up with an equally good planting plan that will remove as much of the nitrates as this plan and maintain a view. And I felt, and I've always felt, it has nothing to do with anyone on the west side of the lake or anything. It has to do with the entire community has had a view. And I realize that all those pictures showed the Phragmites and how high they have gotten, and the other plantings that have choked out that corner of the lake, and we didn't have it. And that's shame on the village, because the village didn't maintain that.
Yep.
Unfortunately, they didn't maintain it. So, but we really wanted that. We have always wanted that, and we haven't gotten it because the village hasn't maintained it. So now we have an opportunity to do something environmentally wonderful, and at the same time maintain a view that the public deserves to have. And so that's the only thing that bothers me. I love the project. I love the fact that we have a private partnership here, provided they're willing to give up the tall plants. But that's where I am. I really feel we could have both, and everybody should be happy with that.
Well, if you go through the plan, Nancy, if you could, because the south end, they list the maximum height.
Yeah,
You have some telling. Not all of them.
I think 15 to 20 feet is pretty tall.
Right, but the purpose of those, or a lot of those are tall bushes and trees, and the reason...
I'd like to compare what it was when they first came and what this is. Has this been done over?
Yes, it's been done.
Okay, I'd like to compare the two.
Are there any openings still? Remember that was
I mean,
one
we have
thing?
6 to 7
No, they
feet.
didn't do it with openings this time.
But isn't that what we originally agreed on, was to have those, even those little windows, so from certain
Right, but-
angles, they had a visible...
Yep, but they were at angles and
Yeah, so-
difficult to use. You know, the purpose now, there are some tall plantings in there, but if you sit down and talk to Dr. Gobler, the reason that you use a taller planting is their root structures are deeper.
Well, that's fine, but I also know, but again, I remember there were like 4 or so very angled, strategically for how you come into the turn or where you're walking or driving to see certain vistas. And so those have been removed.
Those have been removed, yeah.
And I would just ask why. The height of the
Because
stuff?
they
notwithstanding.
lowered the materials that they're using.
Oh, so that's a trade-off. So they lowered some of the plantings outside of the taller ones, but they lowered the bulk of them, thereby...
Right, they kept the high plantings around the corner, and in the first section of road, and then lowered it as it went south.
But wasn't the real...
I'm
sorry. I didn't mean to overspeak you.
Well, so I'm seeing 15 to 20 foot service berries, 3 15 to 20 foot service berries, 4, that's the maximum height when they grow. They'll be putting them in a little lower, 8 to 10 feet, 7 to 8 feet, 5 to 6 feet. That will grow to 15 to 20 feet. And then you have 18 plants that will grow to 6 to 7 feet. We have 28 that'll grow 3 to 6 feet. So 3 feet, you'll get a view, but 6 feet you won't. 36, 5 to 8 feet. 5 feet, for some people have to get up on their tippy toes to be able to see. 120, 5 to 8 feet. Most of them are 6 to 7, 6 to 8, 6 to 8, 5 to 10 feet. All the way down, all the way at the bottom, we have perennial grasses, which are probably the ones that are along the road, I would assume. 72, 3 to 4 feet. 96, 4 to 6 feet. 96, 2 to 3 feet. But the majority of these are over 6 feet. So we're not going to see anything. I mean, if that's what's happening there.
Well, I think those are the maximum heights, and I don't think you're going to see...
Well, I'd like to compare it to, we need to...
Yeah, that's the purpose.
The Phragmites are in full growth for at least 7, maybe 8 months of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And aren't they a good 8, 10 feet high?
Yeah, that's the problem.
So that and they've been there for at least 20 years.
Yeah, it's shame on the village for not taking care of it.
Well, the view of the lake, as admirable as that may be, for the last 20 years, we haven't had one, and wasn't this going to cost them something in the neighborhood of $400,000?
Yes, close to it, yeah.
And yet, of course, if you really want to see the lake, you can still go down there in December and January and February, and these things aren't evergreens and so on, so you're going to be able to see the lake. And, of course, the best view of the lake is from the south end of the lake, and the second best view of the lake is from Agawam Park.
That's the first
this, I will admit that this is a third best view, but you can only see it in a vehicle while you're driving and all that sort of thing, or on a bicycle, and which most of us don't do anymore.
I bike by there, and you can't see it on a bicycle either.
Yeah. Anyhow,
We won't be able to once this is in there.
Well,
We can't see it.
Yeah, but we can't see it now because we, the village, never took the time to take all of that out of there.
No, they never
It was
did.
it's shameful, it was our problem. It should be out of there, and with it out of there, you have the view. And actually, Chris Gopler said, it falls into the lake, and it pollutes the lake, and we haven't done anything about that.
No, we haven't.
So...
But this plan...
Look, I get it. I get the fact that this person has come along. is willing to get his checkbook out, write a huge check to do this beautiful garden along there, and then from his side of the lake, he will never see any traffic. And that's the bottom line.
So I've gone 180 on this, and I've completely changed my view. I also wanted to protect the view. But now we have a lake that if it continues to denigrate, there's not going to be a view. But let me just finish. The issue that I think was raised by Dr. Gobler is the previous approach that they had and the approach that we had on Chickside was a shrub approach. And it wasn't going to attain what this is meant to attain, which is we have development here, we have runoff here, and unless you have a deep-rooted root structure, you can't capture it. That's the first. But the thing that really got me is we have all this concrete here, and everybody's talked about getting rid of the Phragmites in all plans, Chick's plan, our plan, their plan. They're willing to actually remove that concrete and dig everything out and pull it out. The plan that we have is to wick the Phragmites, and you wick the Phragmites with Roundup, and Roundup has glyphosate. And 2 weeks ago, in the New York Times, they talked about the glyphosate lawsuit, which was just lost. So, in terms of effectiveness, this is the effective plan. The other ones are just, cosmetics. And we do have houses going up here, and we have runoff coming down here. So I'm with you on the view, but I'm almost at the point where this is more important now to protect our lake. Maybe we need to get measures to see how effective it is. But we've got to do.
We have to do something. I just didn't want to give the view away if we didn't have to. That's my point.
I agree, but the shrubs I'm hearing are also the ones that were being proposed prey to deer, and they'd be gone in no time. And then we paid for a plan that was maybe not effective when this is. I mean, pulling out the concrete is a big deal, and that's a huge cost, and it's gone forever.
There's two parts to it, too, Nancy, is one, I think you will be able to see it in the south end. I really do, because I've never gone to a arborist and bought a tree, and they tell me it grows 15 feet, and I've never seen a tree grow 15 feet, that I bought anyway.
Yeah.
So I don't think those are all going to reach their maximum height, and I think you'll get a vision. But the biggest thing is we have a major problem in that pond, and I think you realize it. And the prevailing winds out of the southwest push all that stuff down to the north. We need to address it, and we need to address it as quickly as we can. And here's a cooperative project that we can all join in and do, and hopefully this will lead.
I just don't think it's good enough. That's just my feeling. I think that it could be better.
Well, that's why you need to take a look at it.
I did. I have been looking at it.
And there are other projects that we need to do that are equally as important.
So the last revision was 2/2019. I'd like to see the difference on what they changed.
Okay.
I like this plan, and I think we brought in a third party to compare plans, and they said, hands down, this was the better plan. So,
who was the third party?
A fellow by the name of Tony Piazza. So he's a leading horticulturalist. I think he has a doctorate in it, and he is currently working on the Georgica pond.
Yeah, that's right. He is.
So,
how many guys would we have to hire if we do it?
I don't think we should do it.
I think we would hire anybody.
I know that Gary has looked into getting money from community preservation, and apparently there's money that we could get for this if we chose to, do this. I'm a little surprised at Chick's plan, what you're saying about Chick's plan, and I think he should have conversation with Tony Piazza.
He was in the same room. I thought Tony asked some very good questions. I don't want to put him on the spot.
Well, in any event, the reason that I didn't have us vote on it is I want you to look at it and get comfortable in it. Because I think it's really an important important thing to address, and if we can get going, the sooner the better, because spring is here.
Are they looking to embark on this?
Yeah, they would
Is that
they would
what the-
embark pretty much right away.
And the reason why I think they were able to pay more money is 20 people are involved, not one residence.
One of the things, though, that
Many more people.
we do have to look into, and I think when Wayne comes back, because he's doing a little research on it, is that's our property,
Right,
and because it's our property, we need to make certain that,
the right licensing is in.
well, and also that there may be prevailing wage and issues of those natures as well, and that we properly bid the process. And if it's, if it's a service, we may not have to bid it, but if it's an asset of the village and there's work being done on it, we still have to follow proper procurement. So we do need to look into
Oh,
that.
we're a long ways away from
Even if it's
actually putting a shovel in the
Yes.
ground. But
They
Yes.
said they're looking to get on.
Nobody around here is paying less than minimum wage either.
No, prevailing wage.
Prevailing.
Prevailing wage?
Prevailing. A little different
Yeah.
than minimum wage, quite.
quite a big
But the last time I drove by there, the swan was still on her nest, so I don't know how long that's going to be.
It's going to be a while.
So even if it's donated, you have to...
Yes. Well, it's
I mean,
donated, if
I
you're
meant
paying the
the
labor.
services are being donated, private donors are cutting the checks, they still have to worry about it?
Yes.
They're on village
Because
property.
it's village property,
Yes.
so you got to adhere to all the... Okay.
So we got quite a ways to go, but this is the first step. Any other comments from
I just find it
trustees?
very interesting that this has become such an important part of it when the people on the other side, not all of them, but a lot of them, aren't doing anything.
So that is a very good point, but I do think Dr. Gobler had a point, which is the awareness level is not there.
But I find that hard to believe because several years ago, and I cannot remember his name, he has the castle-looking house on the other side, lives in California. He formed a whole group. We went to meetings over there where people who lived around the lake came to those meetings, and they were all supposed to do planting plans. Yeah, so attention was brought to every single one of them. There was letters written to them. There was also, because he was a real environmentalist, and he did all of that with a little walkway going past his property, but put in all the nitrate-reducing plants. And, they're very aware of it, and they're not doing it.
But a lot of people come in and they buy something and they sell it 2 years later, so I would love to see those letters. What we should do is pull those letters out and add the information on the IA system with the links and resend it.
I think they have
I think it's a good point,
a,
Nancy.
You're right.
they have a folder, a flyer that they have.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, that talks about them. They haven't I seen
Well,
it?
they have a website. It's the
And a
Lake
website.
Agawam
Lake Agawam
Conservation
Conservation
Association
Association.
website.
Right.
Mhm. And they have a flyer.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I think we want to see some, you can't force someone to do something, but I think we want to see some traction. We want to
I
see
remember-
other people
Well, that's
jumping in.
what
I
Gopher
remember
said.
years
We're doing this,
ago-
then if no other landowner, I brought it up as a matter of fact, ideally, if this isn't going to make a dent, if the other people privately
Yeah, I
don't
know.
do it, which
So-
means they're foregoing the same view in front of them, which, as you just stated, I think it's hard to mandate. Can be, but do you want to go down that road? I don't know.
Well, we should look into it and see what other places are. We have a very compromised
What's the
water
Georgica
body.
doing? Do you know what they're doing? The
That's a good
Georgica-
question. We should
What
find
is
out.
what?
Since they mentioned
Yeah,
them and the
no,
guy did
we
it,
should-
Oh,
what
Georgica?
did they all agree
Oh,
to do?
they're, so again, I'm not the expert, but they got together and they're actually, didn't they say they were pulling out, they were kind of doing this quasi-dredging?
Well,
because
they were pulling out the.
Where is it?
The Phragmites,
Because
but
they're
they
all privately, it's all private, goes up there. There's no public land.
Oh, there's no public, okay.
I'm not stating, I'm questioning. Is there a public aspect of what the Georgia do?
I don't know.
I think they're all privately.
It's all
That's
private.
a good question.
Yes.
And I don't know. All I know
Public
is,
access to Georgica Pond, is
Yes,
there?
there is somewhere.
Where is it?
Because it's a body of water in the townships, the eastern
Well,
townships.
it's from the beach then.
Trustees, the trustees have a right to access as well as the public. So there is a
but
public
but the-
access
but-
somewhere, and it's trustee-governed water.
okay. Well, apparently their metrics are very good.
And the same thing for Lake Agawam.
It's trustee government water.
I know.
the water.
They may have ceded
Yeah.
maintenance to the village, but they still have rights
To the
on behalf of the public.
Isn't the shoreline versus the water body the
It's the
difference?
shoreline, which fluctuates.
So, a lot to think about.
I mean, I remember when we had the SAVE committee, when the SAVE committee was active and did the plastic bag legislation. I brought up the fact that maybe we should legislate using lawn chemicals and fertilizers that were not natural fertilizers.
I don't think we can. I think the town looked into it. I think it's regulated by the DEC and the county.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe the DEC should look into doing it.
Yes.
On the east end, if our waterways are being affected by all this, and our aquifer.
Yes, they should.
This is unbelievable.
Well, you can ask for
This piece here.
placard.
I mean, this is,
That's my point. I mean, and then, Chemlon, not to pick out any particular company.
Should know better.
I mean, there are
Get their
people who
license
use
pulled.
Chemlon all over the place. And I just think that I don't understand why the DEC isn't doing something about it.
same with,
Or maybe they are, I don't know, maybe they are compiling.
Because no matter what you do, you are still going to get road runoff. Part of our pollution of that lake comes from the other side of County Road 39, all those farm fields out there.
even further.
Rolling down North Main Street, rolling down North Sea
Windmill.
Road, all of it. And, how do you stop that? By putting in the drainage, but on the other hand, guess what? If they didn't have if they couldn't use the fertilizers, it would be a good step in the right direction.
Yep.
Yeah, but it's also the cars. Every time you step on the brake, you emit a little gas and oil, and it sits there on top of the tarmac, and then we get the huge rain, and it just comes right down.
Yeah,
So,
it's true.
and then
That's why we're stepping up all the drainage.
Right.
So won't go in there.
Well, hopefully all the projects together will have some impact.
this is a pretty amazing plan. But by them removing the concrete, I think that was $100,000. It was a huge component. And not using wicking, which is Roundup, or some comparable, which is just as bad.
Okay, any other comments? Make a motion to adjourn to executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel and contractual and legal matters.
Second.
Okay.
Aye.